morning, all. Let's call the Committee on Rules to order this morning. The clerk will please take a silent roll call and report the presence of a quorum. Quorum is present. First order of business this morning is ordering of the calendar. Let's begin with special calendar. Chair will recognize Lady from the 49th for a motion to move items from the special calendar to the House calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all bills on third reading, if you want to look through those couple pages, except Senate Bill 3018 and House Bill 335, so that's the first and the last bills on third reading. I move the other bills all be moved to the House calendar.
Question is that all bills on third reading except for Senate Bill 3018 and House Bill 335 be moved to the House calendar. Would any member like to vote separately on any of these bills? Okay, if not, question on that motion. Those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. Those bills are moved to the House calendar. Lady of the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move we place House Bill 335 to the foot of all bills.
Question is on the lady's motion that House Bill 335 be moved to the foot of all bills on the calendar today. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion will please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. Is there any other business to come before the committee today? If not, Lady of the 49th.
I move we adjourn.
Question on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you. The House will please be in order. Those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by the gentleman from the 32nd Douglas Fast.
Shall we pray? Father in heaven, if there's ever a time that we need you, it is now. For Father, we need you always. And God, your word is very clear that if a people, if a nation will call upon you and follow your ways, that you will flood that nation with great blessing and prosperity. But God, if a nation or a people ignores you and disobeys your ways, God, you will flood that nation, that people with curses. And oh Father, I pray today that you would help us to be the former and not the latter. God, that we can be the head and not the tail, that we can be on top and not on the bottom. Father, we need you, and we ask for your help and your guidance this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
If members and guests will remain standing, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman of the 25th, Doug Painter.
If y'all stand and join me in honoring the finest country in the history of the world. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Thursday, October 14th, 2021.
Gentleman 17th, Doug Lovejoy.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman of the 17th, Doug Lovejoy, asks unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. Lady from the 49th for an update on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our calendar today, special calendar third reading, all bills except Senate Bill 3018 and House Bill 335 were moved to the House calendar. House Bill 335 was also moved to the foot of all bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Introductions. Introductions. Reports of, yes, Lady from the 51st, Doug Fleischauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In our gallery to the rear, we have a couple that are visiting our Capitol from Maryland, and I hope they have. And would you please stand, and would the House please make them welcome?
Are there further introductions? Reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, messages from the executive.
State of West Virginia Executive Department, Charleston, a proclamation by the governor. I, Jim Justice, by virtue of the authority vested in the governor by Section 7, Article 7 of the Constitution of West Virginia, do hereby amend the proclamation dated October 8, 2021 as amended, calling the West Virginia Legislature to convene an extraordinary session on Monday, October 11, 2021 in its chambers in the state capitol, the city of Charleston, as follows. 1, by adding items 37 and 38 as follows. 37, to make a supplementary appropriation of public monies out of the Treasury from the balance of monies remaining as an unappropriated balance in the State Fund General Revenue to the Department of Economic Development, Office of the Secretary. Fund 0256, fiscal year 2022, Organization 0307, by directed transfer, appropriation 70000 in the amount of $10 million, by supplementing and amending Chapter 11, Acts of the Legislature, Regular Session 2021, known as the Budget Bill for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. 38th, to make a supplementary appropriation of federal funds out of the Treasury from the balance of federal monies remaining unappropriated for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022 to the Governor's Office, Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund, Fund 8823, fiscal year 2022, Organization 0100, by directed transfer, appropriation 70000 in the amount of $90 million, by supplementing and amending Chapter 11, Acts of the Legislature, Regular Session 2021, known as the Budget Bill for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. A witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause a great seal of the state of West Virginia to be affixed. Done at the Capitol in the city of Charleston, state of West Virginia, this 15th day of October in the year of our Lord 2021 and in the 159th year of the state. Jim Justice, Governor.
That message will be received. Are there further executive messages? If not, Senate messages. If not, resolutions, petitions, motions. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Still being in the process, possession of the clerk, I move that Senate Bill 3033 be taken up for further consideration.
The question before the House is the lady's motion that Senate Bill 3033 be taken up for further consideration. Those in favor of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares that motion adopted. Question now before the House now is Senate Bill 3033. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be made effective from passage.
The question before the House is the lady's motion that Senate Bill 3033 be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Yes, lady from 51st, Doug Fleischauer is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lady clarify, that's not on our special calendar, and I'm not sure, you're not talking about 3030. Can you clarify what that bill is?
On the board, it says Senate Bill 3033 relating to composition of congressional districts.
Okay. And we are taking up the Senate bill after having passed the House bill, is that right?
Yeah, we already passed this bill.
Okay.
And we're just changing the effective date.
Oh, I see.
To effective from passing.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
Are all members clear on the motion? The question is that the motion is that Senate Bill 3033, which is the congressional redistricting bill passed by the House yesterday, be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the lady's motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 93 ayes, 3 nays, and 4 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further motions? If not, bills introduced.
House Bill 337, making supplemental appropriation to the Department of Economic Development, Office of the Secretary.
Bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
House Bill 338, making supplementary appropriation of federal funds to the Governor's Office, Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund.
Bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Are there further bills introduced? If not, unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Senate Bill 3018, making supplemental appropriation to State Department of Education.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman of the 64th, Delegate Householder, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This supplemental appropriation bill creates a new line of appropriation for the Department of Education, State Board of Education, State Department of Education, for the West Virginia Professional Charter Board, for the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board in the amount of $250,000. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there a debate on the bill? The lady from the 4th, Dr. Zukoff, is recognized.
Will the chairman yield for a question?
Absolutely.
Could you explain to me why this wasn't included in the regular budget?
This money is being used from the general revenue unappropriated surplus funds that we have, but according to the engrossed bill, House Bill 2012, we're going to have to set this up because there is a provision in the bill that basically any failure to act on a charter school application within the time specified shall be deemed and approved by the authorizer. So the authorizer in this case is the school board, this professional charter school board authorizer that we're setting it up, or at least funding it. If not, then anybody who applies for an application after 90 days would automatically be approved if we didn't.
Thank you. So is this something that's going to be standard going forward in the Department of Education's budget?
I can't answer that. I can't answer that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 34th, Douglas Boggs, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentleman Neal.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just to kind of follow up on my colleague's question, I know you couldn't answer the latter question that she asked, but is it anticipated that this is going to be a continual amount that's going to have to come out of general revenue to fund this board?
The problem that I have in answering your question, I do not know how long this $250,000 will last. It could be after 2-3 years. It could be every year. At this point, I do not know.
Are there limits any place as to how much they can actually ask for or use, or is it just open-ended? Whatever they use, they get to ask for the money and then we give it to them?
Right now, I can't answer that question, but the only thing that I would caution the body, if you want to have oversight, and vetting of these charter school applications, we need to appropriate this money so we have that board in place.
But the board basically is already,
The board's in place, but this is funding of the board.
it's not exactly the way I understand it with the composition of the board, and I'm doing this from memory, it's not exactly a board that is looking at this thing from a totally neutral perspective.
Well, according to the engrossed House Bill 2012 that we passed in 2021, an authorizer means the entity empowered under this article to review applications, decide whether to approve or reject applications, enter into charter contracts with applicants, oversee public charter schools, and decide whether to renew or not renew charter contracts. So I think if we don't approve this money, then basically after 90 days, anybody who has submitted an application will be approved.
But granted, but we still really, it's just kind of an open-ended question of how much this is going to be down the road.
I'm just not sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 43rd, Douglas Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman continue to yield for a couple more questions?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So we're going to be appropriating $250,000. And just to clarify, I believe you said that we don't know if this will last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, so on. Is this going to be a continual kind of appropriation that we might have to make over and over, or is this going to be a one-time
That's
appropriation?
basically the same question that the gentleman...
I just wanted to clarify, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically the same question, and at this point I can't answer it. So the only thing that I'm recommending to this body is that we do support this supplemental appropriation. If not, you're not going to have any oversight. And basically anybody who submits a charter application after 90 days is approved.
Okay. What exactly would the $250,000 be used for? Like, would that be staff? Would that be office supplies? What is that exactly used for?
It should be to carry out the duties of this board,
Okay.
which would include salaries, current expenses, and other such items.
Okay. Because this board will be separate from the West Virginia Board of Education, correct?
I believe so. I'm just reading the engrossed committee substitute from 2012, the definition for authorizer. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman of 66, Douglas Espinosa, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this legislation as a longtime supporter of additional school choice options for our children and for our parents. You know, I've come to understand that in the public charter school model, there's really two key factors that are essential for the success of quality public charter schools. One is thorough authorization of those charter applications, and that's exactly what this professional charter school board is intended to do, is to thoroughly vet those applications. I think the last thing that we want to see is for public charter schools to be approved that don't present a well thought out plan that gives them an excellent opportunity for success. And then the other key factor that I've come to understand is that for those public charter schools that do not succeed, that are not meeting the promises that they made to parents and students, we have to be able to hold those accountable. And I think that's exactly what this panel is designed to do, is to effectively authorize those schools and then to hold them accountable. So for $250,000, I think that's a pretty modest investment to help make sure that we are in fact holding our public charter schools accountable and that they're effectively serving our students. I'm also aware that there is quite a bit of federal money that's available out there. I think there's a real likelihood that we will ultimately be able to qualify for some federal grants that other states have received for their charter school programs. So I really see this as really some startup money, a very modest amount of startup money, and I'd certainly urge passage of the bill. Thank you.
The gentleman of 16th, Douglas Hornbuckle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman please yield? Thank you. I just had a question, if you will. Was the original amount to be allocated $200,000?
I have 250,000. I don't know if the original amount was 200, but I have 250,000.
Okay, because there was a article in the Gazette, I believe, several weeks ago that stated about 200,000, and I was just wanting some intel into why it raised to 250,000.
Yeah, I'm not for certain why, but I have in front of me 250,000. And I do want to add also to the gentleman, I believe from the 43rd, he had asked me a previous question about a separate board. It says here under West Virginia Code 185G-15 that there is hereby created the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board, which shall report directly to and be responsible to the state board, separate from the Department of Education.
All right, thank you.
Lady in the 35th, Doug Young, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman continue to yield?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm looking at the charter school bill. Did we just forget to fund it? Is that why we're doing this?
No, it's to set up and fund for the executive director and its staff and other current expenses for this charter school board.
Can you tell me where that is in the bill? Because I just said
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yes. The authorizer is on page 4, which is 185G-2. And then the provision that if they do not act is on page 13 of the bill, which is section 18-5G-6, subsection D.
I see in section J, from funds appropriated or otherwise made available for such purpose, its members shall be reimbursed for reasonable and necessary expenses actually incurred in the performance of official duties. Is there a fund set up? Because I don't see that.
Are you asking me if there's a certain special revenue fund set up in the bill? I'd have to review to see if there's a certain special revenue fund.
So where does it say that they can spend money other than from funds appropriated they can be reimbursed?
Well, that's what we're doing. We're appropriating funds. And keep in mind, if you do not appropriate funds, then that's why I brought to your attention that if there's no action taken by the board after 90 days, any application that's been submitted is deemed approved.
Sure. I gotcha. So are we reimbursing them, or is this an initial funding? Have they already spent the money?
No, they have not been granted any money. That's what this supplemental appropriation is for.
Okay, and I guess if there's a lot of federal money available out there, why are we using ours?
Well, we're actually using general revenue unappropriated. If you remember in House Bill 2022, we reduced the governor's executive budget by $75 million. As of yesterday, we spent $5 million of it. Today, we're spending another $250,000 if this supplemental appropriation is approved.
Okay, thank you so much.
Is there further debate on the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill in any way? Yes, the gentleman from 37, Doug Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 66th yield?
Certainly.
Okay. I asked you to yield because you just got up and proclaimed to be a longtime advocate for school choice. I believe you. I've served with you long enough to know that that is true. This board, and you talked, the board would be appointed by the governor, correct?
I believe that is the case. I don't have the bill right here in front of me, but I believe that is correct. Okay. Just a moment. You are correct.
Okay. Has the governor made those appointments yet?
I believe so. I'm aware of at least a number of those members that have been appointed, yes.
You know how many of them are members of the Cardinal Institute?
I really couldn't tell you.
Okay. Well, more than a few? Would you be surprised if I told you that there were a few of them are members of this institute that's been longtime supporters of school choice?
I just don't know, but I will tell you, I'm certainly, I'm certainly aware of the Cardinal Institute. I understand they do great work in the area of helping to ensure that parents and students do have school choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope they continue to do good work because there seems to be several of them on this board that's going to be providing this accountability over these charter schools. Thank you for yielding. I appreciate that.
All the folks that I'm aware of that are associated with Cardinal, I think are very dedicated to helping ensure that our parents and students do have additional options. And so to the extent that any of them are serving on the board, I'm confident they will do an excellent job.
Okay, well, thank you for yielding.
You're very welcome.
If I may speak briefly.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
I agree 100% that accountability is really necessary. However, it seems to me we're setting up two separate, separate, hopefully equal, but two separate boards. I remember where I've heard of that before in our history. And it seems to be that the cards seem to be stacked with the appointments and the folks that are put on this board. I do know that there were applications put in for a school here in Kanawha County, happened to be right next to one of the best schools in the state. There were amendments that we tried to make when the bill originally passed, that we would focus on areas of greatest need and areas that had low test scores. Instead, they're putting them right next to schools that have done quite well. And on the board for that school, I don't believe there's a single person that lives in the county. They were from Huntington. Anyway, I hope we're able to provide some accountability here. It doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be that we're setting up this board, stacking it with people who've been pushing for these types of schools for a long time. Also, when it comes to local control, we want to push things off on our county school boards when we don't want to deal with it, but when it's something we want to control, then we set up another statewide school board to deal with it. I'd like to see an end to the hypocrisy that we spout out of here sometime. Are we for local control or not? I'll be voting against it.
The gentleman from the 43rd, Douglas Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Okay. I want to go ahead and speak against this. I definitely fully agree that we need accountability, especially regarding charter schools. It is our law, so we have them and we need accountability. But right now, the Charter School Board is currently reviewing 7 applications. They met just last week, I believe, over Zoom to discuss these 7 applications. They still do not have an executive director, but $250,000 to me seems like an exorbitant amount of money that we're going to be using to start this board that's already been meeting. So I think I'm going to go ahead and reject this bill because that money could be spent to benefit other students and all students in a lot more efficient ways. So thank you.
Is there further debate on the bill? The gentleman at 27th, Douglas Ellington, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'm going to speak in favor of this bill. Second part, I don't want to give you any misinformation, but the limited amount I'm aware of, I am on that board. I'm a non-voting member. We've already met a few times, Zoom meetings. There are several people pointed, I do not know each of their affiliations, or at least don't recall each of their affiliations. But funding was not set up in the initial bill. This is to help start up funds. They do have legal counsel they've had to hire so far for these other charter schools. So that's part of where some of those expenses are going to start with. Whether it's going to be an annual, continual thing, there probably will be some expenses. I do not know the amount, but that's the best I could tell you at the moment. But there are startup funds, and the board has met already. And both Senator Rucker and I are both non-voting members on that board. So, and we've already been entertaining those 7 prospective charter schools. So, that's all. Thank you.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House is, does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, we're not here today to debate the whole charter school bill all over again. That ship has already sailed. What this conversation about today is, do you really want oversight? Do you want transparency? Do you want to make sure that this professional charter school board, if need be, if they need to revoke a charter, this is about funding for that professional school board. So with all that, I do recommend passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 70 ayes, 26 nays, and 4 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 3018, making supplemental appropriation to State Department of Education.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The question before the House is the lady's motion that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 73 ayes, 23 noes, and 4 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further bills on third reading at this time? If not, bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 3026, relating to review, approval, disapproval, or amendment of local boards of health rules by county commission or county board of education.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the constitutional rules requiring the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with and the bill be read a third time and put upon its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the constitutional rule requiring that the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with, that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, read a third time, and put upon its passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 78 ayes, 18 nays, and 4 members absent, 4/5 of members present voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the motion adopted. The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 3026, relating to review, approval, disapproval, or amendment of local boards of health rules by county commission or county board of education.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 17th, Douglas Rohrbach, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before us, we have Senate Bill 3026, relating to the review, approval, disapproval, or amendment of local boards of health rules by county commissions or county school boards. This bill is to clarify Senate Bill 12, which the members will remember was adopted during the 2021 legislative session. The main purpose of this is to put terms in and definitions that frankly were left out of the bill. Senate Bill 12 required local health boards or health department rules to be approved by the appointing authority. The policy being that an elected body would have final approval over the local board of health rule. Unfortunately, the term rule was not defined and has created confusion among your local county health boards and your county commissions. So the purpose of this bill is to clarify the rules that the local boards of health need to be approved by the appointing authority. It also states that if not approved within 30 days, the local board of health rule is void. So I'll repeat, if not approved within 30 days by the appointing agency, the rule is void. It clarifies that the local health officer shall administer and enforce state rules, and local health rules. Finally, it provides that a local health officer may issue guidance and health orders. Then it goes on to define what is a guidance and what is a health order. A guidance is a defined term now in this Senate Bill 3026, which means providing advice to a person, the public, a business, a school board, or governmental entity regarding a health issue or matter. However, a guidance is not a health order, which is also defined. An order is issued by the health officer or local health board to protect the public health of the citizens by directing an individual or discrete group of individuals to take certain action to protect the health of the public and stop the spread of communicable disease. An order is limited in scope by permitting only effective an individual and discrete group of individuals, and it is required that certain specific action be directed to protect the public health. That's the bill, ladies and gentlemen. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman in the 32nd, Douglas Fast, is recognized.
Thank you. Would the chairman yield?
Gladly.
Without this amendment that we're now considering, would the local health officer have the authority to issue a health order as defined, which includes ordering individuals and discrete groups to do or not do something?
Well, there's confusion in what we created. And I'll use an example. A health rule might be the rules that the sanitarian uses when they would go into restaurants and do inspections. Now, those existing rules do not have to be approved by the county commission because they're already in place. In the future, if we're altering those rules, they do have to be passed by the county commission within 30 days or they're void. Now, that's a rule. So an order is the enforcement action, meaning that if the local sanitarian goes into a restaurant, does an inspection, and finds woefully deficient conditions, then they have the authority to issue an order to interrupt the business until that deficiency is corrected. So for that, they do not have to go each time they need to take an action in a restaurant or public health matter. For an order, they don't have to go in front of the county commission each and every time they want to enforce an order.
Okay, and there's this mechanism in this bill we're considering that if the county commission does not approve a rule within 30 days, then the rule is null and void. Is that correct?
The gentleman is correct.
Does that apply to a health order issued by the health officer, which is one person? Does that same mechanism apply to a health order?
It does not, because the order is the carrying out of the rule. So the rule will be proposed by the Board of Health, approved by the county commission or municipality, the agency that oversees the Board of Health. And then once that rule is in place, another example might be if they go out to inspect a sanitary system and they find that the package plant is putting raw sewage out into the creek, then the order gives them the ability to shut that plant down now without having to take time to go to get the county commission at their next meeting to shut the plant down. So the order is the enforcement mechanism of the rules that are approved by the appointing agency.
I'm looking at the definition of health order, and I'll just read it. Health order means an order issued by the local health officer or local health board to protect the public health of the citizens by directing an individual or a discrete group of individuals to take a specific action to protect the health of the public or stop the spread of a communicable disease. Is it somewhere else that says that a health order is to enforce a rule? Because I'm not seeing it in the definition that I just read, and I mean that's a big concern to me, giving this much power to one individual.
Yeah, I think that goes back to page 2 where it says enforcement activity. It says means the enforcement activity means the implementation or enforcement of applicable state rules, local rules, or local health department rules. So it would be, the order is the enforcement activity.
Thank you for answering questions.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman to the 44th, Doug Hannah, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman continue to yield?
Gladly.
Okay, so I think a pretty comprehensive amendment by the senator from Oregon was introduced in the Senate, and that was adopted. Can you kind of explain to me a little bit the difference between the bill that was introduced and what his amendment changed it to?
Okay, the introduced bill from the executive is what you're referring to. Okay, the introduced bill from the executive said that anything that applied to a school had to go in front of the school board. And the problem with that, and the reason that was taken out in the Senate, is there's no statutory mechanism that the school board is construed to be an authorizing agency over the Board of Health. So we were making a construction there that there's just not statutory requirement to meet.
Yeah, that's kind of the point I was getting to, is on, I think it's page 5 of the introduced version, it talks about, you know, how the school boards have the authority over any school issues, and I couldn't find that in the Trump amendment, and I didn't hear it in your explanation. So that section is gone.
Yes, sir. The gentleman is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there further debate on the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge adoption. This is really just to clear up for your local boards of health what is an order and what is a rule and what has to go in front of the county commission or the municipality's elected officials and what doesn't. So I think this clarifies SB 12 and will make it much more workable for the people that are out there trying to work for you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 81 ayes, 15 noes, and 4 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 3026, relating to review, approval, disapproval, or amendment of local boards of health rules by county commission or county board of education.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The question before the House is the lady's motion that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 88 ayes, 8 noes, and 4 members absent. Two-thirds of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on second reading.
Senate Bill 3030, updating provisions establishing intermediate court of appeals.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with and the bill be read a third time and put upon its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the constitutional rule requiring that the bill be read on 3 separate days be dispensed with and that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, read a third time, and put upon its passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent. 4/5 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the constitutional rule suspended. The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 3030, updating provisions establishing intermediate court of appeals.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. The gentleman from the 32nd, the Vice Chairman, explained to you a bill that was what we referred to as the Intermediate Court of Appeals cleanup bill. The bill before you right now is exactly that bill with two minor changes. If you recall, in that bill there was some concern about the start time for the new judges on that panel. We wanted to make sure that that court could get up and running on time, and what we had in our bill was that they would all be sworn in on May 1st, 2022. The Senate changed that a bit, which I believe actually makes the bill probably a little bit better. It's on or before July 1, which is when the court goes into effect, but not any time before May 1st. So it gives a little flexibility so we don't have an exact deadline. The other change is a little bit of wordsmithing by our friends down the hall there. They used the term virtual platforms. As you may recall, my friend and I had a little discussion on virtual platforms, and this allows for the court to perform their duties on virtual platforms as they change the term. I recommend the passage of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 93 ayes, 4 noes, and 3 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 3030, updating provisions establishing intermediate court of appeals.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Capito moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
Chair is advised the Senate did not adopt that motion, so if the lady would perhaps withdraw that motion.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Motion withdrawn. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House on Senate Bill 330 to the Senate. Are there further bills on second reading? Bills on first reading? If not, we'll return now to consideration then of House Bill 335, which was placed at the foot of all bills on the calendar today. Clerk will please report Senate Bill 335 on third reading. House Bill 335. Chair is in error.
House Bill 335 relating to COVID-19 immunizations requirements for employment in the public and private sectors.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman at 29th, Doug Steele, is recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the bill is to recognize specific exemptions for COVID-19 immunizations required as a condition of continued employment or hire with a covered employer. The bill specifies 2 exemptions, a medical exemption and a religious exemption. To obtain a medical exemption, an employee or potential hire must receive an in-person examination from a physician or advanced practice registered nurse licensed in this state, indicating that the employee or potential hire would be contraindicated for COVID-19 immunization, that there is a precaution to the vaccine, or that the employee or potential hire has developed antibodies to COVID-19 from exposure or from contracting and recovering from COVID-19. To obtain a religious exemption, an employee or potential hire must present a notarized certificate to the employer stating that he or she has religious beliefs that would prevent them from taking the COVID-19 immunization. The bill also defines key terms and permits a person to seek injunctive relief when harmed by a violation of the bill, or the law in this instance. Mr. Speaker, that's the bill, and I urge adoption. Passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman at 36, Doug Rowe, is recognized.
Absolutely.
clearly legalizes mandates in all levels of state government, private businesses, and nonprofit businesses. Is that a fair reading of it? It does create 2 exemptions, but it does authorize mandates in all of those by definition.
I don't know that mandates would have been unauthorized prior to this bill, and I don't know that the bill specifically authorizes it. I guess what the bill is really saying, if there is a practice, if there's an employment practice of it, these are the exemptions that must come into play.
But clearly the statute includes all levels of state and local government in talking about them having mandates, and that the purpose of the bill really is just to create 2 exemptions for their mandates that they're.
If there were a mandate, then yes, these exemptions would have to be in place. But it's not going to require anyone to create a mandate.
Do you think if someone were to sue an agency or say a local government for having a mandate, that this statute could be used by the city to defend its mandate as being something authorized by state law?
Well, I'm sure lawyers like you and I could figure out how to make an argument out of that. But I do not see that this statute would enable anyone to create one if they were otherwise prohibited from creating one. I'm not aware of anywhere in state law that would prohibit right now an agency or a private employer from creating a mandate.
Okay, but clearly this would be authority that they could point to at the city, saying that we are authorized to do the mandate. Our only obligation is to fairly have 2 exemptions to it.
I think if you were defending that case or prosecuting that case, either way, you would not be doing your job if you didn't say that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman at 37th, Dr. Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Thank you. I was looking at some of the medical exemptions, and one base is if you've had COVID, that's a medical exemption, correct?
Yes.
Can you get COVID twice?
Yes, I did.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
The gentleman at 51st, Dr. Hanson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought that was an interesting interchange a couple minutes ago about what this bill does and what this bill does not do. And clearly, this bill does not ban mandates. We've all received numerous emails from a slice of West Virginians who feel passionately that the legislature should ban COVID mandates. This bill does not do that. If anything, what this bill does is provide some ammunition for attorneys to argue that mandates are allowed in West Virginia. So I think that's interesting. Another aspect of this bill that I think is worth pointing out is that usually when government tells businesses what to do, there are exemptions for small businesses. Now, I'm a small business owner. Other people in this body are small business owners. Sometimes rules and regulations won't impact us. For example, if we have fewer than 50 employees or something like that. This bill does not do that. If you have a single employee, the government is now telling you how to run your business. And then finally, I wanted to talk in a little bit more detail about how this bill relates to hospitals, and more specifically the religious exemption, and how hospitals have been addressing that issue already, because this is an issue that has come up not just with COVID, but with other vaccine mandates that have been routinely used over the years. This is not the first vaccine mandate in hospitals. The flu vaccine is routinely mandated in hospitals. And what happens if there's a religious exemption? Somebody claims that this is against their religious beliefs. Well, there are processes in place. It goes to a committee, an ethics committee, where we heard testimony in Gov.org about a committee that's chaired by the hospital chaplain, There are processes in place to vet these claims to make sure that somebody is not just claiming a religious exemption when there really is none. And these processes work. The data that I had been provided from a major medical provider in West Virginia was that out of about 100 religious exemption requests made so far for the COVID vaccine, about 15 of those were granted. And why is that? Because people were making claims using the religious exemption in ways that were inconsistent with their prior behavior. So what's an example of that? An example of that would be if an employee has routinely taken vaccines that were required by that employer over the years for the flu or for other diseases. But then when the COVID vaccine mandate comes, they claim they have a religious exemption against that. And that's an inconsistent practice. There are people that game the system, and that's why it's important not to simply rely on a statement from the employee, but have a process that's already in place and that's consistent with federal law. Now, you might say that the bill that we're considering today for the religious exemption requires a notarized statement for the religious exemption, which it does. But a notary isn't checking anything about the statement other than making sure that the person who signs that statement is, in fact, the person they claim to be. They'll check your driver's license, check your signature, and certify, yes, it's me, Evan Hansen, who signed that statement. It has nothing to do with the validity of the claim. So for those reasons, I'll be voting against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady in the 41st, Doug Tully is recognized.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, for listening to me. I have been a registered nurse in the state for almost 20 years. I was an ICU nurse for 13 to 14 years in a large tertiary medical center, and I'm a dual board certified nurse practitioner now. I'm fully vaccinated, participated in many community screening events, and participated in vaccine coordination efforts as well as vaccine clinics. Stop labeling those who support this bill as anti-vaccine or anti-business. It's rude and it's insulting. It insults those who have legitimate concerns about this particular vaccine. In healthcare, autonomy and informed consent are two very basic tenets. The emphasis of the patient and provider relationship is very sacred. Patients should be treated as unique individuals, and in this case, some of the healthcare providers in those institutions are becoming the patients. Normal vaccine development usually takes about 10 to 14 years. I provided you with a handout yesterday on your desk. If you'd like to flip it over, it explains like the COVID-19 vaccine approval process as well as the normal process for a lot of the other biologic agents. Vaccine hesitancy concerns due to limited longitudinal studies on this particular vaccine seem to be a legitimate fear for some, and I think we are trivializing that. I've also heard of exemption denials from pregnant women, those with clotting disorders, those that have undergone in vitro fertilization. This bill doesn't prohibit vaccine mandates by businesses. It merely seeks to balance the rights of the employees and the rights of the employers. It ensures that legitimate concerns are addressed in a responsible manner. It helps ensure that a fair and thorough review process of exemptions are performed. It dissuades blanket denials by employers. It ensures that not only the letter of the law is followed, but the spirit and intent of the law and the EEOC rulings are followed. It ensures that the exemption denial processes are not sham processes. One large healthcare employer recently began to examine their denial process once this was added to the governor's call. What does that tell you? It tells me that the denial processes or the denials weren't properly vetted or reviewed by the organization, and that they're concerned that they may have a problem withstanding a legal challenge to those denials. Businesses and healthcare. Let's talk about that a little bit. State Journal, staffing is the #1 challenge facing hospitals as they reach capacity. Units are already understaffed. We have limited experienced nurses at the bedside. By ensuring that we lay off or terminate these people that had vaccine exemption denials, is that the best way to make sure that we provide care for our residents of our state? I think not. We saw healthcare leaders run to the legislature and the government when they failed to plan for the pandemic and didn't have adequate PPE. We heard a lot about OSHA violations in regards to not following, hospitals having to not follow this or having a conflict with the exemptions that this may grant. Well, where were we when we were talking about OSHA violations when they didn't have that PPE? One leader even blamed the government for abandoning them when they didn't have PPE. We saw this same leader blame clinical staff for contracting COVID from the community when they didn't, those same staff members didn't have PPE at their jobs. Recently, 40 West Virginia healthcare facilities were announced to receive Save Our Care funds for overtime, temporary staffing, payroll, and retention bonuses. The price tag to this is going to be $17 to $35 million of money, taxpayer money. If these healthcare businesses won't help themselves to save our care, why should us taxpayers help them save our care or help them save their businesses? If you value keeping West Virginians in West Virginia and are serious about the rights of individuals, I hope that you will vote green on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady from the 35th, Doug Young, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman of government organization yield?
Yes.
Thank you. Were any stakeholders consulted when this bill was drafted, to your knowledge? Any hospitals or maybe the chamber?
This bill was requested by the governor. You'd have to ask his office.
Okay. I noticed that the bill defines covered employer, but I don't see that it defines employee. Do you know what definition we're using?
I believe if it's undefined in the bill, it would be the standard definition of employee.
Okay, so would an independent contractor count for this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. By my reading of it, no, an independent contractor would not be included.
So could a business put in a mandate that for independent contractors and not for their employees?
It's certainly possible.
Okay. Under covered employee, there's a lot of definitions of business entity. It's incredibly vague. I noticed that religious organizations weren't included. Did you notice that?
Are you talking about on page 2 at line 27?
Yes, I am.
Including for-profit or non-profit activity.
So is
that has employees. Well, let's look at this. A business entity, including without limitation any individual, firm, partnership, joint venture, association, corporation, company, estate, trust, business trust, receiver, syndicate, club, society, or other group or combination acting as a unit engaged in any business activity in this state. So to your point, if it was a church, I do not believe that they would be covered by this, but I would also point out that churches have been excluded from other areas of the code for things such as this.
So under that logic, could a church implement a vaccine mandate and not have religious exemptions?
I would say that they could, and I would point to decisions regarding religious institutions that actually allow them to discriminate and say not hire someone that's not a part of their religion and things like that. So I would assume, and that's me assuming, I didn't talk to the governor about this, but a lot of times you will leave a church institution out of one of these.
Gotcha. Okay, and then the or other group or combination acting as a unit, that's pretty vague, wouldn't you say? Like a kickball team could...
I mean, by the way it's constructed to me, it would be any organization of individuals that are engaged in commerce in this state.
Okay. And then we just heard someone talk about fear and hesitancy being a legitimate concern. I do think that's a legitimate concern, and I hope we all acknowledge that. So thank you for bringing that up. Are fear and hesitancy considered legitimate medical exemption?
No.
What about anxiety?
Anxiety could be if a physician was treating someone with severe anxiety and that anxiety routed around vaccinations, or this vaccination in particular, I could see a physician being able to grant that exemption on that basis. Yes.
So do they have to prove a legitimate medical exemption under this? I see it says physical condition, that it's contraindicated, there exists a specific precaution. I mean, would anxiety be a specific precaution?
That would be up to their treating physician. I mean, as you can see here, the physician or the advanced practice nurse are the ones giving out the exemption. We're not telling them how to make a medical determination. That's going to be up to their professional judgment. So we're not giving instructions on either of these, really, whether it be the medical or the religious.
And under the current federal laws related to the ADA and the Civil Rights Act that do provide for current exemptions, all of these facilities, at least hospitals that we know of, have processes set up. Is that right?
That's correct.
Would this completely get rid of all those processes?
No, this just solidifies the process they already have.
How so?
Because it's now contained in state law. So if we were to talk about the federal law for a moment, the federal law is I should say, I'm saying retroactive, not in time, but it waits for an adverse employment decision to be made. So that person wouldn't be able to go to federal court to stop, from losing their job. Whereas the way the state law is constructed, a person could go in and seek injunctive relief to prevent the employer from taking the job away beforehand. So I say it solidifies the federal law because the last thing that we want to see is someone that is missing economic opportunity, not receiving their pay, and having to rely on either unemployment or other benefits. Under this law, they would be able to take that prospective adverse decision and get a very quick hearing on a preliminary injunction where the court can make a determination if they have a valid exemption or not, and that could be over with rather quickly. And it would be in a local state court in their community rather than possibly a federal court that's not in their community. A coal miner in McDowell County may be looking at the prospect of this and, okay, I got to find a lawyer that's willing to go to federal court and litigate this all the way up in Beckley or down in Bluefield, whereas they could just go down to the courthouse in Welch before they lost their job and get a really quick determination by that judge.
I know that with hospitals for religious exemptions, currently you submit the exemption, it goes to a board, is my understanding from speaking to a lot of hospitals this week. It goes to a board, they determine whether it's valid or not. This just says you have to have a notarized document, so they wouldn't be allowed to go to the board anymore, right?
I don't see anything in this bill that would prevent some type of review by the employer.
But wouldn't it just say that the employer has to accept a notarized certification?
The bill doesn't say that either. It says what the employee is supposed to do to give to the employer. That's all.
So the employers can have stricter measures than this?
Stricter measures than what?
In terms of a religious, they could have a board.
I mean, if we look at that real quick, and help me out, what line are we on with this?
Page 1, bottom line, so I guess the second one.
So if we look at that.
Yeah, okay. There are a covered employer shall exempt employees upon the presentation of the following certification. So they have to exempt them when they provide this notarized certification, correct? It's kind of confusing because it's on 2 pages, but if they have the notarized certification that says that it's a religious belief, then the covered employer shall exempt them. So they can't they can't keep their board.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, that's just going to be a difference of opinion between us. I think that no part of this bill would prevent an employer from reviewing that decision or challenging it.
How could
if it were to go to an injunctive hearing, I don't see why they couldn't present evidence in court as to this wasn't legitimate.
Okay, and are you aware what the states around us are doing in regards to these sorts of bills and mandates?
Virginia has no active bill from what I read just a little bit ago. Kentucky has done similar to us. North Carolina had pre-existing law that would control on this. Washington, D.C. has actually done something very similar to what we're doing. Georgia, Pennsylvania has pending legislation. Ohio had pending legislation, but it was not of the same type. Theirs would have prevented mandates altogether, and it's my understanding from reading some of the news that they're wanting to reform that to be more like ours, that it's up to the employer to have a mandate or not. If you do have one, here's the guidelines. Delaware has pending legislation that is similar to ours, and South Carolina's already passed.
Okay, speaking to healthcare workers specifically, it's my understanding that every border state other than Ohio has mandates for all of their healthcare workers.
That's, if you say so.
I do. Okay, lastly, so this is just about vaccine mandates and bans. I know it talks about presenting documentation of immunization, so you can't ask for a vaccine or a vaccine card, right? But this doesn't preclude any local ordinances that may say something to the lines of like a vaccine passport. This isn't banning that.
I did not view this bill as to address the issue of vaccine passports.
Okay, I think that's all I got. Thanks.
Gentleman from the 37th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lady from the 41st yield for a few questions?
I hope I don't live to regret this, but sure.
Thank you very much for yielding.
Sure.
I appreciate that. I'm asking you because you are a medical professional. You just stated that you've been working in the field for a long time. So I just had some questions about medical exemptions that would be granted, both those that are recognized by the CDC and those that are recognized in this bill, because I think it's two different things, correct?
It could be two different things, possibly.
Okay. Well, then, what medical condition would warrant an exemption as seen? Okay, according to the CDC, what medical condition would give somebody a legitimate claim to a medical exemption?
Typically, the most common one is allergies, allergies to a previous vaccine, allergies to a ingredient in these particular vaccines, be it Moderna or Pfizer. Polysorbate, I think, is one. There's a list from the CDC. I actually do have a copy of that if you'd like to see it.
Okay. So one condition, we have an allergy to something that's in the vaccine. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you knew of any others? Any other conditions that would warrant?
Typically, anaphylactic reaction to any previous vaccines, I think, has been looked at before. Mm-hmm. I can't remember off the top of my head. Like I said, I do have a list.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Can you think of any others?
I can't off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Now, according to this bill, it's much broader than that, right?
It gives a little bit more laterality, yes.
Well, what are some of the exemptions that would be medical conditions that would warrant an exemption in this bill compared to the CDC?
In my opinion, I know of one individual that has a genetic clotting disorder, has had blood clots before, and their medical exemption was denied. And that one, in my opinion, I feel, given the nature of the vaccine, probably, especially, Johnson & Johnson had some issues with clotting. I think that probably should have been an exception that was granted, and it was denied by that individual's health care employer.
Okay, and that's in this bill?
It's not in that bit. It's not in this bill, but that's a situation that I feel that that's why there probably needs to be a little bit broader laterality, and it's in between the patient and provider.
Well, in this bill, it's basically just a signature from a doctor or an APRN, right?
Well, it's not just a signature. I certainly hope that with informed consent, you have a discussion with that patient. You treat that patient as an individual.
We both would hope so, but is that required in this bill?
It's not expressly required in this bill, but anybody that is going to sign those is not going to put their license, I would say, on the line by signing something that's illegitimate.
Okay.
I know I certainly wouldn't.
Any kind of doctor, though? Any kind of doctor?
MD, DO, it doesn't specify what type of doctor.
Podiatrist could do it?
I'm assuming.
I just thought of that because actually I'm having some foot pain today. But I thought podiatrist could sign off on it. Or an APRN. Let's see. One of the things that says previously having COVID, which I had it, could grant one a medical exemption. So if I've had it, I could get a medical exemption because I had COVID, according to this bill, right?
According to this bill, yes.
But we learned, because unfortunately my friend from the chairman, he was, and a few other people I know of have gotten COVID twice. And I forgot to say that I'm very grateful that you're fully recovered, and so good to see you back here. We're grateful that you're safe and sound. But back to the questioning. But you can get it twice.
You can get it twice, and you can even get it if you're already vaccinated.
Yeah.
My mother was in a long-term care facility, and actually she was fully vaccinated. And when they did the contact tracing, they found that she had it from a fully vaccinated healthcare provider.
I know
there are no hard and fast rules, and so I think that's why this bill gives some flexibility and some laterality to individuals, and I think that we need to defer to those individuals.
Okay. Well, what's the percentage of people who are being hospitalized who've been vaccinated?
I'm not certain. I'm wanting to say I think I saw 80% are unvaccinated, and I believe 20%. But it fluctuates, and it depends on where you're looking, what geography you're looking. Are you looking in the state, out of the state?
Mm-hmm. So 80% of people who are being hospitalized currently, it was much higher. It's dropped a little bit, I think, with more people getting vaccinated.
Well, no, not necessarily. Excuse me, wait a minute. It's not necessarily because more people are getting vaccinated. It could be because we're having more breakthrough cases.
Well, the higher percentage of people who get vaccinated, there'd be more people who could also feed into that number too.
It's possible, but it's also possible that we've also had more breakthrough cases as well.
But less of those are winding up in the hospital or having symptoms at all, right?
That's what's alleged.
Okay. Do you think that being vaccinated greatly reduces the risk of spreading the disease?
I don't know if it necessarily reduces the risk of spreading the disease. Getting vaccinated, I think, lessens the severity of the disease. I think that has been well established. It's questionable about the spreading of the disease. So I think that's still being researched, and we'll have to see.
Okay. Well,
Mr. Chairman, I'm done yielding. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions that you did answer. I appreciate it. Mr. Speaker, may I briefly speak to the bill? I don't work in the healthcare industry directly, but most of my job these days, Mr. Speaker, involves medical transportation. That's how I contracted the virus back in December. Unfortunately, it was right before I was scheduled to receive the vaccine. I found out that I had it, and I did have symptoms, and it was no fun. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. And then, as soon as I was able to, I went out and I got the vaccine. And that, of course, that was my choice. But I chose to do so because my choice affects a lot of other people. Viruses don't just stay with us. It's not whether I can't choose for that virus to just stay with me. And I have a line of work where I come in contact with people who are very vulnerable. I come in contact with people who are getting dialysis 3 times a week. I come in contact with people who are receiving chemotherapy, people who are immunocompromised. And for them, I chose to get the vaccine because that's the line of work that I'm in. And we should be looking out for everyone. So our choices affect others, especially this choice. And, we talk about mandates. I think a lot of folks would agree with me that we also have much higher mandates than any that could come from a governor, or could come from a health department, or could come from the president. There's a higher mandate. In my religion, the highest mandate, and I might pronounce this wrong, is Pekuach Nefesh. That's a higher mandate to save lives. So I would hope that everybody would, especially those who work in the healthcare industry, would do whatever they can to keep the patients safe. You know, I agree with certain exemptions. Of course, if somebody's allergic to something that's in it, that makes sense. But this bill is so wide open that you could get basically get a signature from a doctor or APRN and be granted this exemption. We're getting ready to get guidelines here shortly. This might put it at odds with this. It puts a whole lot of businesses and healthcare providers at risk of losing a lot of federal dollars. And it's just unnecessary at this point to be rushed through. So I strongly oppose the bill. I'm not going to be voting for it. I do thank you for yielding, though, and clearing up a few questions that I had.
Gentleman from the 50th, Delegate Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I think as I speak to this bill, I'm certainly not against legitimate religious exemptions and legitimate health exemptions. And I think legitimate, and I'm going to speak about the religious exemption part, but when you look at legitimacy, you look at the leaders, the foundations of religions. And so I looked up what some of the religious leaders around the world have said. The Pope has said, getting the COVID vaccine is an act of love. He said, getting vaccinated is a simple yet profound way to care for one another, especially the most vulnerable. Southern Baptist pastor Robert Jeffress, who's a staunch conservative, staunch supporter of Donald Trump, he said to ask God for help but then to refuse the vaccine makes no more sense than calling 911 when your house is on fire but refusing to allow the firemen in. And then he goes on, and I don't necessarily agree with this, he said there is no legitimate faith-based reason for refusing to take the vaccine. And again, I don't think that's true. But it should be, as it's codified in the federal law, a sincerely held religious belief. And then locally, you know, I've heard local faith leader Rabbi Victor Urecki talked about, and we hear about health rights, but he's talked about the fact that there is a religious and moral responsibility to get the vaccine to protect others. I won't belabor this point, but that's my main issue with this bill, is the certification, the breadth of the exemption, that somebody can just say, I have my religious reasons, for those reasons I can't take the vaccine. There's no basis for that. You don't have to say what your religion is. That has to be accepted by the employer. The breadth of the exemption swallows the rule. And I think that now we have private employers that we're taking away the ability to protect the people that work for them, patients in hospitals, family members. And that brings me back to a story in the book of Matthew. When Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he responded, love the Lord your God with all your soul, or with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And I know personally, although there is a loud, and I think people who have strong beliefs about this, and I won't take anything away from that, but the majority of people who talk to me who work in hospitals, they want to see a fully vaccinated staff, a fully vaccinated, they want the protections there to make sure that their family and everybody's protected. And when this is no longer about legitimate religious beliefs, but conspiracy theories, false information, or politics, then we are not acting with love for our neighbors.
Gentlelady from the 51st, Delegate Fleshire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about what kind of message we're sending. And then I want to give you 3 examples about that. What kind of message are we sending, and especially to employers, by passing this bill? How about businesses we want to recruit? Things aren't going so well in West Virginia. And people have been leaving the state for years. And we haven't been able to put a stop to that. And to companies that might want to come in, I think the message is, we know better than you do what your policies ought to be. The legislature is going to make a decision that we know better. And also, we are going to put you in legal jeopardy. We're making a decision that is inconsistent with state law, the Human Rights Act, inconsistent with federal law, the Title VII of the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, inconsistent with guidelines by the Center for Medicaid for those businesses that might be a hospital. We might want to have a new hospital in West Virginia, and they would be risking their federal funding. For businesses, so it's not a very welcoming message. For businesses that are already here, those that have been hanging on by their fingernails, that are really trying hard to make sure their customers feel welcome, that make sure their staff are healthy, we're saying we know better. We're also saying that we don't care what the Chamber of Commerce thinks. The Chamber of Commerce came to the government organization meeting and pretty much begged us not to pass this law. So we're sending the message that even though the representative of small and large businesses in this state has said this is really going to cause us problems, we know better. Then I think that it sends a really sad message to hospitals. This pandemic has been brutal. We've now hit the 4,000 mark. Many of you in this room have lost friends and family members. I have. Somebody who wasn't vaccinated exposed them. And hospitals ought to have the right to say, we're businesses, we're employers, and we know what the best thing is to protect our patients, their families, and our staff. They have really, a lot of their doctors and nurses and aides have lost their lives trying to do their job of protecting the public. And we're saying to hospital employers, we know better. Your hospital association is wrong when they made the decision that they are opposing this bill. So I don't think this sends the kind of message that we want to send. I urge a no vote.
Gentleman from the 66, Delegate Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my esteemed colleague from the 41st yield to a few questions?
Absolutely, for you.
Thank you. You know, I often hear a discussion about bed capacity during this pandemic, and I'm just curious from your perspective as a practicing nurse, I believe in a hospital setting, are we really talking about physical bed capacity, or is it more an issue of staffed bed capacity?
It's more an issue of staff bed capacity. It has to do with having enough nurses to even open those beds. It's my understanding a lot of the local facilities here, I think one of them had over 60 beds closed because they did not have enough nursing staff to open up those beds. So what that leads to is individuals or patients being left in the emergency rooms as what we call quote unquote border patients until they get adequate staff on the floors to open them up, which usually doesn't happen, or somebody transfers out of one of those units and you can get them into the unit. So they sit for sometimes days down in an emergency room waiting for a bed to come open because there's not adequate staff.
So certainly I think it's fairly well known that there is the prospect of terminations of a number of our medical professionals who, due to medical concerns or perhaps religious concerns, may face termination in the fairly near future. What impact would that have on staff bed capacity if, in fact, folks, perhaps some of the folks that have joined us here this morning are terminated despite the fact that they have medical or religious grounds for which they'd seek an exemption?
It could be catastrophic it could add a catastrophe to an already very, very critical, intense situation. It would not be good for our patients, it's not going to be good for our hospitals, and it's not going to be good for the citizens in West Virginia. I can assure you, if I'm sick enough to be in an ICU, hooked up to a lot of machines that look like this and a lot of drips and pumps, I want someone who is, it doesn't matter to me if they're vaccinated, but you better hope you have somebody skilled enough to run that continuous renal replacement therapy machine and also run those pumps and be able to titrate those drips, because that will be the difference in you getting out of the hospital alive or having another alternative outcome.
Well, thank you for that clarification, and thank you and your colleagues across the state who are caring for us during this very difficult time.
We want to care for West Virginia. Thank you. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 3rd, Delegate Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I guess we're officially done doing it for baby dog. You know, for the past couple months, our governor has been going around the state handing out toys to people, spending a lot of money doing it. A lot like Oprah, you get a truck, you get a truck, you get a truck. Well, now they have transportation to continue to leave our state in droves.
Point of order.
His leadership and yours.
What does this diatribe have to do with the bill at hand?
If a gentleman would confine his points to the bill before us.
Oh, I'm there. You know, this week, we celebrated, because that's what you guys are doing now, you're celebrating 4,000 dead West Virginians. We surpassed that mark. Entire cities being wiped out. It's like Lewisburg and Ripley being wiped out. And instead of coming in here, maybe having a moment of silence for them, maybe reflecting on the policy decisions we're making, we decide we're just going to give empowerment and a voice to the anti-vaxxers, the anti-faxers, the anti-sciencers. We have quite a few who came today. I know there was going to be a rally. It's not really a rally, but I'm glad you're able to fill the Capitol a little bit. Past few months, mostly you're filling hospitals, and that's a problem for our medical community. So I did a little research. You know how you get on Facebook and people are like, I just need to do a little more research. Well, here we go. Statistics. These are facts. These are facts. In the past month, September 8th in particular, DHHR statistics, 90% in the ICU were unvaccinated. 91% on ventilators, unvaccinated. 83% hospitalized, unvaccinated. It's not an anomaly, it's a fact. But yet, we're here today to empower those who want to remain unvaccinated, who want to harm their neighbors. That's not how West Virginians want to do things. We like to look out for each other, look out for our neighbors. That's not what this legislation does. And we do know, based upon the questioning today, it does allow for mandates. I feel for the people who came down today and sent a lot of emails, because I feel like you're really not getting what you wanted. The process, severely flawed, just like this bill. The governor dropped it at 10 p.m. 10 p.m. And then we have a process that involves rules, and Rule 77 of the House Rules says a bill that deals with vaccines, hospitals, pandemics. Guess where that should go? It's not a tough question. The Health Committee. Imagine that. It should go to the Health Committee. But it didn't. It went to Gov.org. And how much time did we spend on this bill in Gov.org? For the people of West Virginia watching, really thoroughly vetted this bill. 30 minutes. 4,000 dead West Virginians, and they got 30 minutes of airtime in our legislature. 30 minutes. We had a few doctors that are here locally rush to the Capitol and give a presentation within 30 minutes because they're concerned. They're concerned about their staffing. They're concerned about if you go to the hospital to get treated, that those treating you aren't going to make you sicker, or maybe you die from contacting COVID at the actual hospital. Those are concerns we heard from actual experts in the medical community. They have not been heard throughout this process. So I will stick to listening to the professionals who actually know what they're talking about, and not the politicians, especially the ones who have been traveling the state, saying one thing, and then doing another by dropping this bill at 10 p.m. and not having it vetted by the Health Committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 16th, Delegate Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. There's been a lot of discussion about the Equal Employment Opportunity Act and the EEOC. And so while I've been here, I decided to Google a little bit about what they're doing. And as I look at this, I found a case from back in, I believe it was 2013, where two delivery drivers were awarded $240,000 because their employer fired them for violating their religious beliefs. Now, what was that violation of their religious beliefs? Delivering alcohol. There were two delivery truck drivers. They delivered soft drinks, those sorts of things, and they were asked to deliver alcohol, and they refused to do so, and their employer fired them. And the EEOC stepped in. Now, bear in mind, that's not putting something in your body, right? That has nothing to do with that. But you know what they got? $240 grand, $1,500 in back pay. And then in addition to that, I'd like to read for you what the General Counsel of the EEOC said under the Obama administration. EEOC is proud to support the rights of workers to equal treatment in the workplace without having to sacrifice their religious beliefs or practices. EEOC General Counsel David Lopez, this is fundamental to the American principles of religious freedom and tolerance. That's the EEOC. So I find it quite interesting that we've had a lot of attorneys stand up and say, my goodness, we've got to protect the people from themselves. My goodness, we can't possibly, allow folks to make these decisions for themselves. Guys, the reality is here that WVU Medicine was asking for people to name their religious or spiritual advisor, saying they may have to contact them, contact other religious scholars to determine whether or not that person's deeply held religious belief actually is a deeply held religious belief. Well, it seems like this trucking company tried to do that, right? And it cost them $250 grand. Now, there's going to be a whole lot of people that are or have been fired because they chose not to do this. Folks, I think that we're saving some of these companies and entities from themselves. Because if the EEOC steps in just like they did for Mr. Mohammed and what's the other gentleman's name? Mr. Bulshale, the reality is that I believe that we're going to end up with a whole lot more lawsuits, and we're probably saving them a whole lot of money. And so for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I would urge passage of the bill.
The gentleman to 17th, Doug Lovejoy, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to belabor the law. It's been well discussed, good points raised. I just want to say one thing that hasn't been discussed, and that's about child immunization. You say, wait a minute, that's not in here. It was originally, it's taken out, and that's good. When I ran for office 5 years ago, I guess, we were in that big discussion of we're always 50th. We need to be first. We need to be higher. And that's a goal that every one of us shares, right? But there's one area that we are first, and that's in child immunizations. We have the strongest child vaccine laws in the United States, one of 5 that doesn't allow a religious exemption. Now, that's not in this bill, but my fear, if we for the first time codify that exemption in West Virginia state law, which is already protected in federal law, it's a slippery slope. And I guarantee you, and I will stand and remind you, come spring or January, there will be bills to roll back part of our child immunization, and part of the argument will be, if it's good enough for the grown-ups, why isn't it good enough for the kids? I believe strongly in those child immunization laws. I like being first. I like knowing my kids are protected there, and I'm not going to support something that starts us down that road. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman to 51st, Doug Williams, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last year, in regards to this issue, we have heard a lot about liberty, and rightfully so. Liberty is a foundational tenet of our republic, of our democracy. However, I want to remind you that the founders, when they cited liberty and the pursuit of happiness, they led with life. They led with life, that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And certainly there will be times in our society when these things are at odds with one another. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote that my neighbor has the right to swing his fist up into the time that his fist meets my nose. What he is getting at with that is that certainly you do have rights, but when those inflict upon my rights, upon my pregnant wife's rights, who is a member of a vulnerable population, then you need to consider the underlying argument, the fact-based argument, which is that this vaccine saves lives. It prevents further infection. That is a fact. And with this exemption, with this simple document that gets around the exemption process that has existed to date, it's kind of a wink, 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 here's a medical exemption for no good reason. And all that it serves to do is to bastardize and debase legitimate medical exemptions. There are people with legitimate medical exemptions that seek dismissal and exemption from vaccinations, and we are debasing those with this simple document. This is not the right bill at this time for West Virginia. As my friend from the 3rd mentioned, we've lost 4,000 people. Let's not lose any more, to the best of our ability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman in 35th, Douglas Scaff's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to try to bring us all back together here and summarize what we've heard today so we can move on. First up, thank you to my colleague from the 41st and the 49th that I know of what you do, caring for our people day in and day out. Thank you all for what you do, caring for the people of West Virginia day in and day out. We may disagree on certain things, but seriously, thank you. I have a lot of family members in your profession, and I sincerely thank you. No one wishes this pandemic on anybody and put you all through that. First up, I just want to remind everybody, and it's Friday. We got summoned here for redistricting. I think we did our job. We can't speak for the other side of the hall. Thank you all as my colleagues. We were brought here to do a good deed, and we did that. During this redistricting special session, our governor dropped this on us, I think, Tuesday night maybe. But just, we talked about mixed signals he sends and the messaging he's sending. We came down here to do one thing, and then this wasn't as important for him to put on the original call, but then like at the last hour, he dropped it on the second call, but yet then we have another call, and it's okay, I get it, it can be changed. But think about the mixed signals our governor sends. And we talk about wanting more and more people to help us kick this pandemic down the road and kick COVID. We're going around the state giving out prizes and do it for baby dog. I thought I'd never say that. But giving out prizes to encourage people to do more. So you say that out of one side of your mouth, and then you put something on the call that does completely opposite that. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm a business owner. Multiple businesses, small and large. It's been tough through this pandemic. But I'm talking about the mixed signal our governor even sends on that. In Monday's press conference, he says, our private businesses are private businesses, Justice said Monday. We should not be telling private businesses what they should or should not do. That was Monday. Then on Tuesday, he put something on the call that tells private businesses what they should and should not do. And then he wants to announce to the world that we're open for business, move to West Virginia, come here, come one, come all, live, work, play, raise a family. We need businesses, we need entrepreneurs, we need the Brad Smiths, we need everybody to come back. Why would you want to come back here if there's a chance, on a whim, on a Tuesday night, we could be called back in here and we could be asked to tell you, Mr. Business, that just relocated here, how to do your job, how to manage your employees. I wouldn't want to locate my business here. So just think about that. We can disagree on the argument and all that, but I'm going to stand up clearly and say I'm not against exemptions. I'm not against exemptions, not against religious, I'm not against medical. I'm not against that. That's not my point here today. My point is I have a list of 50 businesses here in the last 24 hours, major employers, top 10 employers in all of West Virginia against this bill. Every major hospital, WVU Medicine, West Virginia Hospital Association, Mountain Health Network, Cabell Huntington, St. Mary's, list goes on and on, Mon Health. Hospitals, I think, are going to feel the brunt of this, but we'll get to that in a second. But the bottom line here is this: we have a Chamber of Commerce Every business entity in the state, manufacturers association, every large, I represent the Chemical Valley here, every one of them reached out to me and said, Doug, what are you guys doing up there? This is a slippery slope. You're starting to tell businesses how to run their day-to-day jobs. Now I have a company that has a lot of truckers. I require them to wear seatbelts. They have to get tested for drugs regularly. They have to do a physical condition of employment to make them as safe as possible to do that job so it doesn't harm anybody else. I have another job that doesn't require that, or another company that doesn't require some of those things because it's just different safety standards. Well, bottom line here is this. Federal code, like we've talked about, already says in 2 weeks, I think October 21st, 22nd, but who knows, you're right, it could be longer. But the bottom line is, President on down have already issued that regulations will be coming. We pass this today. You can make your own opinion. I'm not going to say yay or nay. We could be out of violations, but if they magically mirror what the federal puts out there won't be a violation. But we will be if it's different. Federal supersedes state. So we're doing this for approximately a couple weeks. Just a couple weeks. Then when federal comes out, we're going to, like my majority leader said, might have to come back down here and fix it, which we can, at $35,000 a day, but we'll fix it. So my point is, what's the rush today? Businesses are already doing this. They're already putting things in place. And here's where we are. A lot of you and my colleagues, and I will conclude, I will leave you with this. I stand with you as a business owner, as a proud citizen of West Virginia, and a colleague to you. We come here together, every one of us, want to make this a more business-friendly state. A lot of you went to numerous conventions and conferences with me, Chamber of Commerce, BIC, certain things, and we talk about what do we need to do as legislators to make business thrive. They all say, well, same thing, get government out of the way and let us run our business. This bill does the opposite. We are telling businesses, specifically hospitals, how to manage their employees today. Now, that's fine. Vote how you want, but I just wanted to remind you of that. My colleague just spoke, without mentioning names, just got an award. You know what that award said? You know what that award was? Free Enterprise Award. Free Enterprise Award. And the definition of free enterprise was allow businesses to be free and do and innovate and be creative and manage their employees and create solutions to succeed in West Virginia. You're going to vote against this bill. That does the opposite of what that award stood for. I don't know, maybe one day they'll consider me, but I doubt it. As an unendorsed chamber member, I'm here as a business owner of West Virginia, just asking you, don't tell me how to run my pizza restaurant, my newspaper, my trucking business, or let me run it to the safest way as possible as colleagues and as business people and as West Virginians. We know our business the best. As fellow people that stand here together saying, what can we do to move West Virginia forward? Don't send the wrong signal that we're about to do today that leaves doubt in all those businesses' mind that are thinking of relocating here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady in the 51st, Second Walker's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had a list of questions that I was going to ask the chairman. But as I see the responses of some of my colleagues, as I see the folks in the gallery getting very upset as each and every one of us start to speak, as I see them doing this it's about the money. What about the people? So I'm going to still ask the questions, but they're just going to be rhetorical. Would a violation be per employee per incident? What is the ocean fine per violation? Has the COVID-19 vaccine been fully approved through the research process? Why is Governor Justice encouraging vaccines and then allowing lax exemptions for some folks to have a loophole? What is West Virginia's message that we are sending? Are we anti-business? Are we anti-health? Why are the exemptions so broad? Why should taxpayers save businesses, and why should businesses save taxpayers? But the thing that stuck out most to me is when the delegate from the 41st said, if I had someone in ICU, I would not care if their health care providers were vaccinated. Well, damn, that hit hard. Because on June 17th, I had someone that was admitted into ICU with a leukemia diagnosis that took his last breath at 12:32 a.m. on June 19th with a brain hemorrhage. That person is my heavenly guardian angel, my king, Dimitri Walker. And when we started receiving emails from different providers across the state saying I'm not vaccinated, and after we did Dimitri's first Morgantown blood drive, my mother, who is vaccinated, was positive for COVID-19. Now, I don't know if it was part of my grief, and my mother goes nowhere. I shop for her and 15 other seniors because they are my neighbors, and I am doing above and beyond. No, I'm doing what is right to keep them safe. So for me, it's not about the money, because baby, I ain't got none. I work 3 jobs starting at 3 a.m. For me, yes, it is about freedom and choice. That I should be comfortable enough to know that someone who is caring for my family is not going to kill somebody else when I go home. Now, I have worked with the majority leader in doing testing in her district. And I have busted my butt to make sure that the BIPOC community also had that testing and education. Now, did I get blackballed? I sure did, because I'm not on that African-American COVID-19 task force, and that's okay. But I still get up every day and I do my doggone job. We need the businesses here. We need the healthcare providers. Like it or not, we depend on the federal funding from Medicare and Medicaid. I'm going to say that a little slower. We need the federal funding from Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid is just not for people who are lazy that don't want to work. It's for working families who don't get insurance. It's because their income isn't where it's supposed to be. Medicare is just not for our seniors, but it's for disabled individuals. So when they need to go to the physician and they don't have a provider number at that hospital or that doctor, who's going to eat up the cost? I do not want to tell you what you should and should not have in your body. But as a mother, as an only child, as a newly grieving mother, medical exemptions fine, religious exemptions fine, but the lacks on them, I don't know, y'all. I'm not the deputy, the sheriff, the judge, or the jury, but I can tell you I'm still hurting, and it's hard to put on a mask every day and hear that I am taking your freedom and choice because of a vaccine. The same vaccine that healthcare providers mandate for the flu. Do you take Tylenol? Do you take X-Lax? Guess what? You shouldn't, because that should be against your religious exemption. Now, I don't know what you're going to do here, whether you press green or red. And I don't want to be guilty by association, but know that I hear you. And I see you. I'll be pressing red because this current bill is just a little bit too lax for me. And I gotta still protect my other king and my mother and those seniors I take care back home in my community. A notarized piece of paper is not enough for me. There's too many what-ifs in the process. I don't disrespect you if you choose not to vaccinate. Don't disrespect me because I choose to respect and protect other mountaineers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 16th, Doug Mant, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hey, you know, I respect everybody's opinion on what we've done here today. We all have our concerns. We all have our experiences, what we've done. I, too, am a small business owner, as most everybody in here knows. We've talked that we're against free enterprise. We're anti-health. We're anti-business. You know, it sounds to me, and this is the way I look at it, we're not taking care of our liberties, our freedom, and our constitutional rights. We have those. To me, this bill doesn't do enough for our freedoms. It doesn't protect us from making our own choices. We all know that a vaccine protects our bodies, protects us better. It doesn't stop the spread of COVID. Fact, my daughter, she had both. Later on, she has COVID, unfortunately. And it all affects us differently. Thank you for Danielle Walker on doing the blood drive, which it was time for me to give anyway. I found out that I had COVID, did not know, and I'm pretty sure it was during session because I was very tired. Didn't lose taste, didn't lose smell, didn't have a temperature, but it is what it is. It affects all of us differently. You know, and what we're talking about doing and protecting business and protecting other people, we cannot afford as a state of West Virginia, my county in Cabell cannot afford to lose any more jobs. We have people that have payments, that have homes, that have children in school, and that doesn't make it any more important than people's lives. We all have that, and that is important. But we cannot continue going from here forward being scared and not realizing the science that vaccines don't stop the spread of COVID. You know, I mean, I'm around people every day, and it's my choice whether I get vaccinated or not. I don't want somebody to tell me that I have to be vaccinated. That's not right. So, although I don't agree 100% with this bill, I am going to vote for it, and I hope that later on when we come in again or in January, we can make it even stronger for our freedoms and our liberties. Thank you all very much.
The gentleman from 43rd, Doug Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just very briefly, colleagues, I come from Elkins, and I live in Elkins. We have an acute care hospital there called Davis Medical Center. It's about 80 beds, and we provide a lot of services to our community. It's a lifeline for our community, for not just my county, but surrounding counties. And many of us come from districts where we don't have trauma centers, but we have hospitals that are the lifelines. If a patient is, it's minutes matter. If a patient needs, stabilized before we can get them to a trauma care center, that's where we do it. And I'm not in a government organization, but I did sit in and watch the meeting, and we heard testimony from a representative from the Hospital Association that said we could lose, as many of us has talked about, funding from the federal government with Medicaid and Medicare. I understand the debate here, and I understand many of our concerns and why we would want to vote for this or not vote for this, but I cannot consciously vote for something that could potentially put my local hospital in financial stress. considering the amount of care that's provided, the lifeline for our community, that's something I'm concerned about. So I'm asking you guys to think about that. Our hospitals, our smaller hospitals especially, that rely on a lot of our funding from Medicaid and Medicare, if this could put them at risk. So I will, with that being said, I'm not going to be supporting this bill, but thank you.
The gentleman number 36, Doug Rowe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to point out to the body that please don't be surprised if after you go back home that you're told that this is a mandate bill. Let me read to you what the bill does say. It defines covered employers, and this is who it applies to. And the covered employer shall mean, this is on page 2, the state of West Virginia, including any department, division, agency, bureau, board, commission, office, or authority thereof, any political subdivision of the state of West Virginia, including but not limited to any county, municipality, or school district. And what the bill does then is identify 2 exceptions. And some people would say that they're fairly narrow exceptions because it's based on religious belief and medical necessity. So that means that probably 98% of the folks who are required to have the vaccine will be required to do it, and so it doesn't really present an opportunity for folks to say that this is that we're establishing constitutional, we're trying to give some relief to constitutional rights. The exceptions are fairly narrow as to their content. Now, they're not well written, and it's a quandary, and if you're a business like a hospital and you have a mandate requirement, I think you're having lawsuits hang over your head, because it says that any person, this is on the same page, line 25, any person or entity harmed by a violation of this section may seek injunctive relief in a court of competent jurisdiction. So we could have a situation where a hospital says that they don't want someone who's unvaccinated to work, have that person get a court injunction to require the hospital to open the doors and let that person work. And you say, well, but they could put them someplace maybe where it wouldn't be in contact with patient care or something. Well, the bill says that you can't discriminate against these folks. In other words, they have full range of the hospital to do what they've been doing. And that's why I think that the medical providers are so concerned about the bill and the way it's going to be construed. It creates an injunctive relief to go to court to force the hospital to let you continue to work with patients if you're unvaccinated. Now, you know, it's an unusual bill. It's a governor's bill. He wrote it the way he did because I think that it is intended to broadly authorize and legalize mandates for vaccines, and in that sense it depends on your position whether you're for or against. But it clearly legalizes all mandates. It also, unfortunately, puts a hard, difficult burden on employers to discriminate against these folks in just moving them to a different location in the hospital or taking them out of patient care. So it's very difficult on employers, but it does create a mandate across the board in West Virginia, and I don't know how many people would come under the 2 very limited exceptions. One is of course for medical purposes, and there may be an exception for that currently, and then second would be a religious exemption. It's pretty broadly worded. I understand the feds may have some redefinitions of some of these terms in their own applications, which apply, by the way, to the major employers. But excepted from those requirements for the feds are the small employers. There is no exception in this bill for small employers. Someone who has 5 or 6 folks can have an injunction put on them because they expected a vaccine to be used by somebody that they work with very closely in a small office. So there are different difficulties with this bill. I encourage the folks to read the bill and understand the mandate that's being legalized across West Virginia, and the fact that it's probably going to be legalized in terms of about 98 to 99% of all the people who are employees under the bill. So it's a difficult vote for us, and I respect that, and I know I really respect the people who are concerned about our liberties, but also those folks who are concerned about just preventing this pandemic from overwhelming us. I have 2 clients who went to the hospital without COVID, got COVID, and died of COVID. And it's just a difficult situation for all of us. And I appreciate your patience. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 67th, Delegate Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from Cabell, who sits behind me, for whom I have great respect, just said a few minutes ago that vaccines do not stop the spread of COVID. That is technically correct. But all the evidence out there on record shows that vaccinations do seriously slow down the spread of COVID. And that's what's important. Listening to many of the members debate this question of liberty, I'm reminded of when I first went in the Army back in 1968. We had the draft back then, and it was even before you had the lottery. It was really arbitrary. And quite a few people tried to get out of the draft by being conscientious objectors. And the military did have some method by which they tried to find out whether someone really was a conscientious objector or just simply wanted to get out of the draft. I don't think that's a violation of a person's liberty. To me, freedom is ordered liberty. And without order, there is no freedom. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I have gone back and forth today debating if I was going to speak on this or not. But I guess I'll have to take a couple moments to reflect upon some of the statements that have been made here today. First, I know my friend and colleague from the 16th earlier was speaking about the Eeoc. And he was talking about decisions that the Obama administration made. And I applaud that. And if we're reflecting, I would like to talk about our previous Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Donald J. Trump, back in March of this past year, speaking on the vaccine specifically, said I would recommend it, and I would recommend it to a lot of people that don't want to get it. And a lot of those people voted for me, frankly. Said that to Fox News. And then as I got a moment to reflect a little bit more, to my other colleague from the 16th, we've been talking a lot about choice, freedoms, and liberties. As someone who runs a shop in downtown Huntington, I have 2 employees in the office, myself and my branch office administrator. I'm not going to request that she gets the vaccine, and that is my choice as a small business operator and owner. I don't think that people coming into my place of business, they don't have to, they don't need to. It's their choice. But I also reflect upon a conversation that I had earlier this summer when I was with my good buddy from Canal, the best minority leader in America. We were at Pullman Square. It was the Summer Series concerts. And there was a little argument, debate amongst 2 friends. One was a leader of the SEIU, another was an employee at the hospital. They came together, but they were in a downright argument about the vaccine and the mandates, and they hadn't mandated a vaccine yet, but they were going in that direction because they were losing so many workers because of sickness. And as we went through the discussion, it was heated at first, but then I said, listen, I value one's opinions and their personal choice to not get the vaccine. I said, however, there's a certain standard a certain standard that some professions and employers have to live up to. People in government, people that are in hospitals, or law enforcement, people that we deem essential. Because when they check into that hospital, that's not a choice of theirs. They have to go there for treatment. And if they're exposed to something that could further put them in decline of their health, that's not fair. But then I also have mixed emotions on this, because I'm also going to give some applause where it's due, because all the numbers bear, whether they're across the country or in our state of West Virginia, that the majority of folks thinks that we should be doing more to protect our neighbors. Now, whether you want to call that a mandate or not, that's up to you. But they're talking about the vaccine. So in this body, and I'm going to applaud you, we've listened to the minority. We've listened to the minority of folks. Because all throughout this whole process, I've seen good friends on picket lines, and again, throwing up, terms as far as liberties and freedoms and discrimination. And so the part of me that's, again, sort of back and forth on this one, because now I do know that we'll pay attention to minorities, and we'll listen to people when they don't have numbers and do something. I don't know if it's for political reasons or not, but I am honestly don't know, because it can be done in this body. But I will leave y'all with this, and the gentleman from the 3rd couldn't have said it any better, just simply talking about stop, pay attention. We've lost, and counting, 4,000 people. It doesn't always have to be politically expedient to do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady in the 48th, Doug Campbell is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had good morning, everyone. First of all, I've taken and listened, and we've also mourned together. Gentlelady from the 51st. I acknowledge all of those deaths of West Virginians. At the beginning of this pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty. I have a lot of notes here, and I'm just going to have to go away from them, so bear with me. The reason we're here today, we'll get focused back, is because there are many West Virginians that are about to lose their jobs. It's the bottom line. Many of them have not had a vaccine yet, and they're taking care of patients. There are workers that are have actually administered the monoclonal antibodies for one patient and then turned around and they've helped with chemotherapy. I've heard from healthcare workers that are greeted at the door by their husbands or their wives. They strip down, they shower before they do anything else. And they've been doing this for about 18 months. That's why we're here. Sometimes I feel like we're in upside down town. I'm in upside down town. I'm in disbelief. Those of you that know me or are familiar with what I talk about all the time, it's about freedom. And we are the last bastion on earth for this kind of freedom. My religious beliefs shouldn't be scrutinized. My God shouldn't be compared to your God. My quiet moments of contemplation, I shouldn't have to justify to you. And I shouldn't have to justify it to a board in order to keep my job. These healthcare workers have been out, they've been very vocal and very saddened. And when I came here in September, I had a message on my phone from a nurse anesthetist in Harrison County. And he told me his story, and I sat at my desk and I sobbed. He doesn't want to leave West Virginia, but he will. He's going to lose his job, and he'll go to those other states that we shall not name, and he'll make a good living, but he doesn't want to leave the beautiful mountains of West Virginia. He doesn't want to leave Harrison County. So that's why I stand in support of this bill, which is not a perfect bill. I think I've discussed that with many of you. I'd like to see more freedom and more liberty, but I rise in support of this, and I will be pushing green. I thank you all for your time and your thoughtful consideration, your examination of the facts, and seeking out your own knowledge to make your own decisions and do what's right for you and your family. God bless you.
Is there further debate on the bill? Lady in the 49th, Doggett Summers is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For my colleague from the 35th, I just want to make note that last session we passed Melissa's Law so that hospitals would allow us to visit our loved ones when they were near death, and we were still champions. So, of free enterprise. For me, this debate really isn't about the vaccine. I'm pro-vaccine. My ER colleagues and I all stepped up in December, one of the first people to take the vaccine. And I do think it's been beneficial in decreasing the severity of the disease. In fact, I wish the booster would have been available a couple weeks sooner, because then maybe I wouldn't have caught COVID as my immunity waned. For me, this is about listening to my constituents who elected to me, my coworkers, and fellow healthcare personnel who have been fighting the good fight for almost 2 years. We are tired. We want to be heard. We want to be valued and not cast aside because we have concerns about a vaccine. We find ourselves in a position where this bill, in which we're being characterized as either for business or for the worker. What a funny, how isn't that odd that one side of the aisle all of a sudden is trying to protect the minority, as the gentleman from the 16th said. He thinks it's the minority of people. I've heard from so many people, I can't even tell you, many vaccinated that have concerns. But here we are pitting business against worker. Why can't we, shouldn't we be for both? Why can't we just have 2 exemptions? Why can't we do that? Over the past few months, I've heard countless stories where I've had to question the need for government intervention. At first, I thought, this is going to work out. Businesses are giving exemptions. Well, then they weren't. Because of those stories, I'm advocating for the body to act. How do I not act when a breastfeeding mom or a pregnant woman comes to me and says, Amy, the FDA hasn't approved this for children under 12. Isn't that what I'm carrying? Isn't that who I'm feeding? How do I do that to my child? But employers aren't listening. I've had people turn in the exact same exemption. One was granted, one was denied. Guess whose was denied? The person that was 15 years older, nearing retirement. Isn't that interesting? How do I not act when many individuals have natural immunity to COVID, and that's not good enough? When did science take a back seat? I don't understand this. How do I not act when in less than 20 days, these people will lose their jobs? They will not only lose their jobs, they will lose their careers. Today is a balancing act of individual freedoms. Where do those end and where do business rights begin? Today, I suggest we err on the side of individual liberty and vote green. Thank you.
The gentleman from 36, Doug Barracks, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just pulled up a poll here from the Chamber of Commerce back in September of 2021, and it just basically says 67% of West Virginia voters say that businesses should make the decision on whether employees get vaccinated. 18% say the state legislature should make that decision. We're in the minority on this one, folks. We should butt out, leave it up to the employers, and I think we should vote no on this. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from 45th, Doggett Martin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the previous question.
Only the gentleman from the 29th is seeking recognition. Gentleman from the 45th has moved the previous question on the bill. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is, shall the previous question be ordered on the bill? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There are 10 ayes, 87 noes, and 3 members absent. Less than the majority in the affirmative, the previous question was not ordered. The gentleman from the 19th, Doug Griffith, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things that I continually think about is how much I respect everyone here and those in the gallery. We are here expressing our opinions, and my fear is, however, that we so often come into this room with preconceived notions. Our minds are made up, and the debate, while compelling, I don't think has swayed a single person. And so what I'm going to ask us to do at this moment is to certainly respect people's rights, but I would ask that everyone here present stand for a moment of silence in remembrance of the 722,000 Americans and 4,000 West Virginians.
The gentleman from the 66th has raised a point of order. Gentleman will state the point.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is, I believe, encouraging some type of action here, and I believe that we should focus on the debate without those type of theatrics. Thank you very much.
The chair will remind all members that we direct our debate to our colleagues here on the floor of the House. The gentleman is recognized to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the nature of your assumption, as I have understood the nature of everyone else's assumptions here. I'm a pharmacist. Our pharmacy has given just about 6,000 vaccinations. And it's very important to me to be part of our community and to see people's lives saved. I've lost several friends. I just want us to reflect. I'm not going to change anybody's vote. I want us to reflect for a few moments about life and about the people we love. And it's not going to change your vote on this issue. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking us to take a moment of sober reflection to remember the lives of those that have been lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, the chair recognizes the gentleman from the 29th, Doug Steele, to close debate on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've spent at least an hour now making this about something that it's not. This bill does not stop an employer from enacting a mandate. We're not stepping in and telling any private business whether they should have a mandate or should not have a mandate. The only thing that this bill is doing is it says if you're going to have a mandate, here's the guidelines that you need to go by. Those guidelines are fundamentally the same as federal law. We're not confusing anything. We're not setting up litigation. What we're doing is having dual law with the federal government on this. A lot of people say we don't need to do it because the feds have already done it. I've tried to get rid of all kinds of things in this state because the federal government already does it. We have a Human Rights Commission, right? We have a state Human Rights Commission that does the same exact thing on the same exact law that the Eeoc does out of Pittsburgh. And we spend $4 million a year making ourselves feel better because the federal government is doing the same thing. We ought to do it too. We have a state mine safety office that literally has workers decorating for parties and bar mitzvahs because they don't have enough mines to inspect, when we got 400 federal mine inspectors in this state that are hitting our mines every day. We don't hear a debate about that. We start trying to talk about legislation, get rid of that. Oh no, it's going to be a problem. But now, just go, wait a minute. We have conflicting signals coming from the federal government. We have conflicting signals coming out of CMS. We have conflicting signals coming out of the White House, who's changing its mind every other day about what we're supposed to do with this thing.
So we're giving some clarity and we're giving some guidance that establishes the religious and medical exemptions that we're already recognizing through federal law and setting up a quick, as I said earlier, a quick method of access for an affected employee or an affected employer to take care of the problem without damages, without fines, without crimes, without attorney's fees, but to go into court and have a quick hearing in front of a circuit judge that you elected in your community so you can determine whether or not you have a valid exemption or not. And I stress again, we are not here to determine the efficacy of this vaccine today. We've heard talk about the governor going about and having, the governor has one of the most robust vaccine programs in the nation. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, you must say it's robust. You must say that of all governors in this nation, he has pushed and pushed and pushed for what he believes is the absolute right thing. And I know not all of you agree with that. But I think what he recognizes and what I recognize, and I think the majority of people here recognize, this is not about whether or not you should get the vaccine. It is about if you have a valid exemption from it, should that be granted? That's all. That's all. You don't have to believe in this vaccine to vote for this bill. You don't have to be against the vaccine to vote for this bill. We even got in today into calling people anti-vaxxers. We're going to label them anti-vaxxer. I've been through that. I've been through that. Yeah. Gentleman from 37 brought up I've had COVID twice. Second time I had the monoclonal antibody treatment. After that, you have to wait 90 days. A lot of people might find this interesting. I got my vaccine. This is my vaccine card. Got it July 22nd, August 18th. CVS, two different pharmacists at the same CVS gave me the Pfizer vaccine. I'm not here because I don't believe in your vaccine. I'm here because I believe in personal choice and personal freedom. I believe in looking out for that little guy. And we say we don't want to get involved in regulating businesses. Oh, for heaven's sake, we got a whole committee for it. We regulate every profession in this state. You talk about your business not being regulated? I mean, for goodness sake, we told you how wide the entryway had to be. I mean, my goodness. We told you how many studs had to be, in a row. We gave you a poster to put up out back to let your employees know how much you had to pay them. We told you how much you had to pay them. Really? Free market? We care about that minimum wage. We told you how much to pay them. We told you if you own more than one business, you got to give the same benefits to the one business that you give to the other. You can't have a different health plan. You can't have a different retirement plan. You can't have a different disability plan. You got to withhold taxes. You got to send them to the federal government. You got to send them to the state government. You got to buy workers' compensation insurance. You need
Gentleman from the third has
coverage.
raised a point of order. Gentleman will state the point.
Yeah, is he actually going to close on the bill at some point?
I'm sorry?
He's not speaking about the bill. He's speaking about other regulations that are not related to the bill.
Chair will ask the gentleman to stick as close to the bill as possible.
I was getting carried away, Mr. Speaker. I'll get back to it. Let's talk about the bill. The bill does not stop an employer from complying with federal law. The bill does not prevent an employer from requiring COVID-19 vaccination. This bill does not conflict with federal law, as has been said today. This bill does not hinder an employer from running their business. The existence of a mandate in and of itself would indicate that proof is required. So the talk of creating this apparition that we won't know what process to follow is just false. This bill does solidify that West Virginia employees need to follow federal exemption law. This bill provides a more efficient and cost-effective path for employers and employees to settle exemption disputes. This bill provides assurances for which our constituents have been asking for since March of last year: certainty. Certainty that we are not going to devote ourselves to a religion of fear. Sitting around and saying that we're afraid so everybody else needs to do something is not what got America to where it is today. It's not what got West Virginia where it is today. It's not being afraid to be free. It's not being afraid to stand beside somebody, whether they have a vaccine or not. It's about being free to work your job, to raise your family, and not be subject to somebody walking up to you and saying, "Where's your papers? Where's your papers on your way to work? You can't go to work today. Where's your papers?" That's not the America I want to live in. The America I want to live in, I could drop this card right in the trash. It wouldn't matter. Because you have your freedom to be you, I have my freedom to be me. And I decide what goes into my body. I decide what goes into my kid's body. And if my employer wants to require something, fine. That's great. You can still require it. But you're going to recognize these exemptions. They're legitimate and they exist. There are 22 other states that have done some other version of what we're doing here today. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Washington, D.C., Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Montana, New Jersey had pre-existing, North Carolina had pre-existing, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon for certain professions, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah. There's only 2 states that went in the opposite direction, Connecticut and Maine. Connecticut and Maine. Those are the only 2 states that I can find that went in the opposite direction. There are a litany of other states that have pending legislation that's doing more than what we're talking about doing here today. Some of the states I listed to you outlawed mandates altogether. Outlawed them altogether. What we're doing today is saying that while we are cautious and as a government we support the vaccine programs that we have, we're not going to undercut them, but we have to recognize the fundamental rights of our neighbors in their religion, and respect what we said we were going to respect from the get-go. When we started talking about masks and vaccines, the message always was, I wear mine for you and you wear yours for me. I get my vaccine for you and you get your vaccine for me, because there's going to be people out there that can't do it. And as the majority leader said, I've gotten a lot of those phone calls too, from women that are scared to death because they're 3 months pregnant and they've had 4 miscarriages in the past 5 years, and they're facing losing their job at a hospital because that hospital system has told the physicians, you're not going to work here anymore if you give an exemption out. I've had that story. I've talked to moms that have had miscarriages shortly after getting this vaccine. I've talked to a lot of people who have a lot of concern if we're not providing an avenue to address this rationally and logically. And that's what this bill does. This isn't a radical move. This is a rational and logical way to deal with an issue that our constituents, a large number of our constituents, are having. And it does so in an inobtrusive way toward business. And for those reasons, I encourage you to support this. Whether you like the vaccine or not, this is not about the vaccine's efficacy. It's not about whether it works or not. It's about how your neighbor's rights work. That's all. It has nothing to do with science of a vaccine. It has everything to do with the fabric of America. And I urge adoption.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. For what purpose does the gentleman from 34th Douglas Boggs seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Per our previous discussion, inquire regarding Rule 49, various boards and commissions that I serve on.
Yes, the gentleman has represented to the chair that the gentleman does serve on the board of a healthcare provider and of an insurance entity. It would be the ruling of the chair that the gentleman would belong to a class of 5 or greater individuals and therefore should vote on the question.
Thank you.
The question before the House now is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following delegates have paired in accordance with House Rule 43. Delegate Booth, yea. Delegate Lovejoy, nay.
For what, the clerk will not open the machine. For what purpose does the gentleman from the 29th Douglas Steele seek recognition? Oh, okay. Now the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The clerk has announced the pairs. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 67. Clerk will close the machine. On that question, there are 68 ayes, 30 nays, 2 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 335 relating to COVID-19 immunizations requirements for employment in the public and private sectors.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The question is on the motion that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following delegates have paired in accordance with House Rule 43. Delegate Booth, yea. Delegate Storch, nay.
Clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 70 ayes, 28 nays, and 2 members absent. 2/3 of the members voting in the affirmative. Chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Are there further bills? There are not further bills. House will momentarily please stand at ease.
Hello, everyone. Today is a monumental day, beyond belief. And this one will go down in history as a day that will absolutely change the format of this state in many, many, many ways. You know, there's been a lot of talk over a long, long period of time, decades in fact, where people were going to absolutely solve the broadband problem throughout West Virginia. You know, when it really boils right down to it, you know, I think of Chelsea Ruby. Chelsea Ruby sitting in my office at the mansion or in the library at the mansion and saying, you know, it's pathetic that in the state of West Virginia, we don't have broadband like everybody else. It's really sad in lots of ways, and it keeps and drives a lot of people out of West Virginia or restricts them from coming to West Virginia because they can't believe it. They can't believe it when they get here and they absolutely look at really what's going on across our state. Now, we've had a lot of big problems to attack over the last years and years. You know, when I walked in the door, I mean, just think of the deficit levels that we had. We've built with these great people that are right behind me right today and many more. We built a rainy day fund in excess of $1 billion. We changed those absolute budgets, you know, deficits to budget surpluses. We absolutely have our pension funds that are now at record levels as far as their funding. We've given pay raises to the highest in state history to our teachers, to all the service, all of our workers in state government. Tourism's exploding. There's a lot of orange cones out there everywhere as far as the roads are concerned. In some way, somehow, we're getting through this COVID disaster. But really and truly, what we really need to do right now is take another great big step forward. Today, I am announcing $1 billion broadband strategy. You know, it's like nothing that we've ever done before. Absolutely, we have a chance and an opportunity now to really fix this. You know, as we go forward, for folks that are just trying to simply do things like pay their medical bills or do their schoolwork or run a business, absolutely they'll have the opportunity to do so in West Virginia. Now, it's taken a lot of great people. We stood on the Capitol steps, not long ago. These people right behind me. We made a promise. Did we not make a promise? Well, today we're fulfilling that promise. Surely in West Virginia, we've got a lot of real challenges with broadband. It's mountainous, and our populations are rural. In lots of situations, there's not very many people that we've got to go a long way to be able to reach and get to. And so therefore it's very expensive. Absolutely, there is no reason why we have absolutely been so long and so far behind. So there's people all around me right now. We want to be thankful to our senators. We want to be thankful to our congressmen and congresswomen. We want to be thankful to all those that are putting in the licks. But really and truly, right this moment, right now, we're going to change the trajectory of West Virginia in a bigger and better way. Absolutely, without any question, this is going to be the largest broadband investment that we've ever made. We want to massively expand the broadband networks. We're going to make available an additional 200,000 or more homes in West Virginia. The work will go on from the private sector through the federal government and through the local governments. We're going to use and take advantage of the RDOF funds that we did. We were able to attract $362 million into the state of West Virginia. And we did that because because last fall, we moved up the state guarantee level to make sure that our ISPs could get every last possible dollar of that federal money. We took a really bold move, all these folks right here and myself. I sent the bill up. We took a really bold move that enabled us to grab $362 million of that money. And just think, West Virginia is now getting the most, I love the most, or first, the most FCC dollars per capita of any state in America for broadband. Now, we've worked together. I thank the legislature for working hand in hand. Like I said, I thank our senators. I thank our congressmen and congresswomen. There's been a lot of great work. But in addition to that, today we're putting another $100 million into this thing. This is going to be our phase one. Not just $100 million, all of it inclusive together, $1 billion. It's going to absolutely set us on a pathway in West Virginia like none of us could ever dreamed of. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of cooperation from a lot of folks. You see an awful lot of them standing right here. I can never thank them enough. And absolutely, that's what we want to do. We want to just keep moving West Virginia forward in every way. Now, I'm going to pass the ball right now to Mitch Carmichael. Mitch is our Secretary of Economic Development. He's doing a great job. He's tremendously familiar, and absolutely, he's going to tell you a lot more, but I couldn't be happier, really and truly. There's too many things in West Virginia that have been really tough through this pandemic, but today is a landmark day. That's for daggum sure. But Mitch, take over, sir.
Well, thank you, Governor. And it is a landmark day. And I want to thank you personally and thank the legislators that have had such a big part in structuring this program that makes available over $1 billion for investment in new broadband opportunities throughout West Virginia. And the focus of the program, it's clear from the U.S. Treasury and clear from the governor and the legislature, is to go serve those who do not have service. And it's really inspiring work to do that. We've structured the programs in order to put broadband, high-speed, gigabit fiber optic cable to homes in West Virginia that will enable distance learning, remote work, telehealth, all the things that are so incumbent on a 21st century economy. And these are the tools that we have in place now to move forward to deploy those assets. And we've already structured, with the help of the legislature and under the direction of the governor, 4 programs that will enable the funds to flow to the ISPs and to the entities that will make these networks available, will ensure that there's no overlap in competing funding streams, that the networks are smart, coordinated, and deployed in a world-class manner. These programs, and we have lots of detail on them, but we'll just be very brief in saying the first is a line extension program. And I think probably all the people in the audience and those here are aware of all those moments when you hear your neighbor say, I have broadband, but my neighbor has it, but I can't get it. And that occurs over and over and over. So we've structured a program to help deploy and extend those existing networks to get that last mile to those very valuable, precious citizens. Also, we have a fund established that will incentivize local communities to come together, and we'll help them with matching funds, help them with network design, to deploy the assets that will build the networks and utilize a coordinated, synergistic approach to expand broadband networks. And then the couple other programs, one is a major project initiative that builds big data pipes into remote areas of West Virginia that would otherwise take years to deploy. And then finally, Governor, you mentioned Chelsea Ruby and how she manages the state parks and makes sure that broadband's deployed in those areas. We have state parks that do not have broadband service. And so we have a fixed wireless program that will quickly reach those areas. And so I think this program has been basically approved at the federal government level. We'll be filling up these buckets at the state level. And I just want to take a moment to thank you and the legislature for all the work that's been done to this point to be able to deploy these assets in the most efficient manner. And I look around my colleagues and I see those who have, and you, Governor, who have worked so hard to make it available to attach fiber optics to poles, to dig once policies, for rights-of-way issues, all the things that have created an environment that West Virginia currently is near last in America in terms of broadband connectivity. But let me just say this. Right now, West Virginia is experiencing some of the most incredible economic growth in our history. Governor, we have, and you've alluded to the fact that we are top 10 in America in terms of GDP growth in the second quarter. That's an amazing statistic. We have the highest growth in the Southeast or the Midwest. Our unemployment of 4.8% is nearly 10% less than the national average. You've generated budget surpluses of over $400 million last year, and that's a transition from when you took office to a $500 million deficit. Already this year, you're running $140-some million in surplus. Rainy day funds over $1 billion. Pension funds are all basically fully funded. And you've done all this, and it's all this success with the worst broadband in America. Can you imagine now, with the $1 billion investment and the 200,000 homes minimum that will be deployed with these assets that you've made available, the sky is the limit for our growth and our opportunities and our prosperity. And I know that, lots of times, Tom Brady gets the accolades for being the greatest of all time, the GOAT, right? I think this administration gets the award for greatest. You're the GOAT, Governor. And because of that, I think it's a great day to celebrate this moment of incredible investment in West Virginia, a recognition that we need broadband, the programs have been established, and we're off and going with the legislature's help and allocation and your funding. Thank you.
Well, let me say this, Mrs. words are really kind up until call me the GOAT. But Brady's pretty tough now. I got to give you that. But nevertheless, you don't do this thing, you don't do anything in life by yourself. You know, to think that we've been able to accomplish all that we've accomplished and have broadband as bad as it is in West Virginia, you know, I hadn't really ever thought of that before. I really hadn't. But the door is open. The door is wide open for us now to really go. This is an absolute unbelievable day. And to think that we're going to put a stake in the sand, $1 billion broadband program and everything, and as we go forward, this is just really our phase one. As we go forward, we're going to continue to invest, and we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to make it better and better until we have absolutely flipped every rock. And before I go, you know, before I sign off here, I want to just say this. We've got the President of our Senate, Craig Blair, here, and our Speaker of the House, Roger Hanshaw, and many, many, many senators and many delegates. And they put in a lot of long hours, and they put in a lot of great work. And I appreciate them more than you'll ever know. And in addition to that, we've got some folks that, you know, that Jordan is going to call up that's on with us now. And if we've got any delegates or senators, y'all come on up here. Come on. You know, we've had some that were working so hard that they didn't get here and everything. And they just keep working. That's all there is to it. You know. But I want you here because I need your help. We got a birthday today. This beautiful lady right behind me, Amy Grady. Now, and even though it's not going to sound all that hot, because I know Craig's going to lead us, you know, I want us to sing happy birthday to her. So Craig, start us off and you lead us. You got the mic. Come on, Craig, let's go. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Amy. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Good job. Good job. Jordan, I'm to you now, I guess.
All right, thank you, Governor. We'll now hear from United States Senator Joe Manchin.
Thank you so much. And Governor, thank you and all the legislatures for being there. I appreciate it. This is an all hands on deck because this is a one in a lifetime opportunity that we're going to have. All of us working in federal level, knowing that the partnerships that it takes to make these things successful. But, you know, we're talking of something not just is going to be life changing. This is generational changing. We have, with the amount of money that's coming from the federal government, and we've had with the CARES Act and also the American Rescue Plan, is $2.55 billion has come directly to the state of West Virginia on that. And then we had $679 million that has gone to the local counties and municipalities, and they have some flexibility. But what it takes a game plan. What you're putting together today, Governor, is exactly what it takes. The highest priority we have, this connectivity is the same as my grandparents, your grandparents and great-grandparents went through the 1930s when there was no electricity. That was a game changer in the quality of life for everybody in West Virginia and America when electricity was basically distributed to everybody. And internet is that same type of infrastructure that's needed for us to be able to compete and improve the quality of life in West Virginia, as we can do. But when you look at all this coming through, the American Rescue Plan, never have we seen this in my lifetime or have I ever read about it in history, and I don't think we'll ever see it again. With the COVID packages that we put together in a bipartisan way last year, the American Rescue Plan that was done this year, the basically bipartisan infrastructure bill that's sitting over in the House, waiting for a vote, everything that has happened and everything that I believe will happen when we pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill will give the state of West Virginia $840 million directly for broadband. And you're putting it to good use by matching it with state funds. And I appreciate that, Governor. I appreciate all of us in this together. This is not politics. It's not Democrat or Republican. This is good policy. And our people need it. And I'm so thankful to work with you and making sure the legislature, all of us, have all the information you need and all the tools to be successful for the people of West Virginia. So God bless the great state of West Virginia. May God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll go to United States Congress.
Thanks. Senator, thank you so much, and you're right. You're right in the fact that how Shelley has stepped up, Senator Capito, and all of our congressmen and congresswomen, and we cannot be more thankful. You know, really and truly, it is a day without question that we all are pulling the rope together and making it happen together. So thank you, sir.
The whole thing about what you're saying is absolutely correct. It's up to you all to manage it. You and the legislature now taking the bull by the horns and putting the highest priority we have is connecting West Virginians to the world, West Virginians to the economic power of the internet. That's what you're doing. That's the highest priority. And God bless you all for doing that. And we'll be right behind you.
We'll now hear from United States Congressman David McKinley.
Thank you. And Governor, congratulations on your focus in the legislature in accomplishing this. And it's been an honor to work with my fellow colleagues we have in Washington to try to make this a combined effort. One thing we've learned through this pandemic was it's unconscionable, absolutely unconscionable, that in this day and age, 2021, that during this pandemic, our children, often throughout West Virginia, whether that was Hardy, Hampshire County, or wherever, Randolph County in West Virginia, they would have to go to a fire station to get a Wi-Fi connection. They'd have to go to a school parking lot. This is unconscionable that we allowed this thing to happen. So I congratulate you on your aggressive behavior in putting this investment program together. Because if we're going to continue to be able to reach out and help our vets with telemedicine and telehealth, for PTSD or whatever those issues are, to allow telehealth and telemedicine to expand, we've needed this for a long, long time. So I would agree with Senator Manchin where we're talking about we have an infrastructure bill. As long as we can keep it separate from the social spending and just pass this infrastructure bill, we're going to be able to add even more to this program to be able to make sure that we have sewer and water lines, broadband, all available for West Virginia. So we do have an agenda ahead of us. The connectivity is very important for social welfare, how we all deal with each other when we're dealing with the opioid crisis and on and on and on. This thing you've hit is a home run in focusing on broadband. I thank you for that, and I thank you to the legislature for backing you up and continuing to support. We're going to do what we have to do. Carol and I work well together in Congress, and we're going to continue to see that we get more funds and more activity, more focus back into West Virginia. We deserve it. So God bless you, and God bless the state of West Virginia.
No, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll now hear from United States Congresswoman Carol Miller.
Good afternoon, everybody. Wow. Thank you, Governor Justice, for organizing this incredible, wonderful event today. This is a great day for West Virginia. This historic broadband investment will bring more connectivity, commerce, and opportunity to our state. Thank you, Mitch and Roger and Craig and all of you all in the legislature for your hard work and working together. It shows what we can do as West Virginians. And I'm just happy to be able to work on the federal level to help secure millions of dollars for this project as well. This type of leadership from Governor Justice is exactly what we need to propel our state forward, his vision, and what we're accomplishing. I can't say thank you enough. I'm just so thrilled to be with all of you today to celebrate this news. God bless you all.
God bless you, Carol. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from West Virginia State Director of AARP, Gayleen Miller.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Governor Justice and members of the legislature. Like you, AARP has long supported the widespread deployment and adoption of high-speed internet across the Mountain State, with a particular emphasis on those areas that are currently unserved and are more rural areas of West Virginia. As others have said, we know that affordable, reliable, high-speed internet is no longer a luxury. It's an essential infrastructure. So I so appreciate the work that all of us have done together to pull the rope, as you like to say, Governor, to make sure that we have access to broadband that enhances the quality of life for all West Virginians as we age. And as others have mentioned as well, this proposal makes a significant investment in our state and our people. So I will tell you that AARP welcomes the opportunity to work with you, your administration, along with legislative leaders on this bold initiative to move West Virginia forward. Thank you all for your leadership, the opportunity to be here today.
Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll hear from CEO of Boone Memorial Hospital, Virgil Underwood.
Good afternoon. Thank you all very much for allowing me to be here. It's an exciting day for us in West Virginia. Thank you, Governor Justice. Thank you to our congressional delegation and to our state legislature. Improving the health outcomes of this community are at that goal is at the forefront of what Boone Memorial Hospital is trying to accomplish. And when we look at the social determinants of health, those cannot be addressed without affordable high-speed broadband internet. The limitations imposed by the lack of high-speed broadband do not end just at telehealth. They go to education and economic opportunities, access limitations. When you look at all that, all roads from where I sit lead to health. And so Boone County has about, I think it's less than half of our citizens that are broadband users. Additionally, our download speeds in Boone County are about 1/3 of what they are in other counties, even where we have it. And so the importance cannot be overstated. It is not simply a life-changing event or even a generational changing event, as Senator Manchin said. I think it's an event that will impact eternity for West Virginia. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Governor. So proud to be part of this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And that's a pretty profound statement. You know, impact eternity. That's pretty good. All right, before we go, I want to recognize Kelly Workman. She's a coordinator for all the broadband stuff. But Kelly, you got to come up here and at least let everybody see your face. You know,
she does a great job.
You know, I'm sure she does a fabulous job. And keep coming now. Kelly, thank you so much. Great job. Great job. And last but not least, I want to offer up, and I know these fellows have never turned down talking, but you know, Speaker Hanshaw, President Blair, have at it and tell us your thoughts.
Speaker Hanshaw.
Well, Governor, thank you. We have said at this table in this room and acknowledged before that the broadband backbone is to the 21st century economy what the interstate highways were to the 20th century economy. It's the way we move goods and services throughout America and throughout the world now. And if West Virginia is going to be a serious player in a 21st century economy, we have to make serious investments in the kind of infrastructure necessary to bring that into reality. So this is yet another step towards bringing West Virginia into a 21st century economic position. We want it known to all of the business interests out there around the world today that are looking to deploy capital and make investment and make expansions and recruit workers, that West Virginia is, in fact, a player in the 21st century economy. Governor, we thank you for that vision.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Go to it, young man. You did pretty good on the singing. You ought to be doing good on this, too. Oh, okay.
I didn't come prepared to speak, but it's real easy to speak about broadband in the state of West Virginia. Everything's been covered on that. What I want to do is actually thank your leadership, the leadership of the legislature. We're committed, and the people of West Virginia need to know this. They need to know that we're committed to fiber on the poles, broadband throughout the state of West Virginia. COVID has demonstrated this more to us than anything else, that it needs to be done. But we're in a position, we've got a state that is actually growing. We have prosperity in this state, and if we want to attract populations to this state and jobs to this state, broadband is essential to do that. And we get that. And we're in, as the governor has said, that we're in a financial position to be able to rebuild a state into what the 21st century. And I can't thank my colleagues enough from both sides of the aisle and the governor's office. And we do something that I believe that has not been done near enough in the past, and that we even still need to do better into the future. And that's communicate with each other and proactively take issues, whatever they may be, and address them as quick as we can for the people of West Virginia. We're doing a great job at that now. Brian's over here frowning at me for one reason or another. But the fact is that I can remember when one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing. That is not taking place in the state of West Virginia. And when it goes like that, you're not wasting time nor money. We work together, and Governor, you're the leader for being able to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And my chief of staff, Brian Abraham, here, he's worked hard. He's done a pretty dadgum good job. We're proud of him.
He's got the key.
But nevertheless, you know, again, you know, whether it be Shelley or Joe, or it be Carol or David or Alex, and all those on the federal level that have helped in every way. And I refer to them on a first name basis because I appreciate their work, and all of us here do. But absolutely, these great people behind me and everything, and many more, are making great things happen in West Virginia. And so for them, I thank them, and we're going to continue to lead. We're going to continue to move forward, and by God, we are the best. And we just need to absolutely believe it and show it and be proud of that pond, because I'll tell you, this is the greatest place on earth, in my opinion. Thank y'all again in every way. God bless you. Thank you. Thank y'all.